Hey, this is Alt Shift X. Today we are talking about House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 4, Tumbleton. In this episode, Lord Ormond Hightower reveals his wild, crazy, villainous scheme for Prince Daeron Targaryen. He wants to make the kid king. Daemon finds his daughter Rhaena with the dragon sheep stealer. Ulf gets banned from the pub, and it breaks his poor heart. King Aegon scoops some poop, and Helaena Targaryen is pregnant. This is surprising stuff. This is very different to the books. The show, I think, has been getting further and further away from the books, so not even I know what's gonna happen next with some of this stuff. So it's very exciting. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about what's going on, what does it mean, how's it different from the books. We are doing these streams each week. Next week's live stream will be a little later. Next week's live stream will not be on the Sunday night, it'll be on the Monday, and this is because we are traveling to cover the new play, The Mad King. I'm excited about this play because it promises to reveal some of the oldest secrets in the Game of Thrones books about Rhaegar and Lyanna and Howland Reed and Arthur Dayne and Ashara Dayne. So we will be covering that play, and our coverage will be on Nebula first. So if you want to hear what we think of this exciting new play set 16 years before the Game of Thrones books, sign up to Nebula, and you can also watch Dragon Time on Nebula, which are some lengthy chats with Alt Shift X and Glidus each week, coming out Sunday night each week. Episode 4 of Dragon Time will be out on Nebula very shortly, and Nebula's a good way to support this channel. Anyway, let's talk Hot D. Welcome everybody to the live stream. Let's get into it. I feel like we should first do a family tree check. Do you want to do a family tree check? Because this episode finally confirmed that the boy with Ormond Hightower is Daeron Targaryen. So check on screen. This is Daeron Targaryen. He is the fourth child of Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower. So Daeron has been off screen until now because Daeron was in Old Town being raised by Ormond Hightower. So Ormond is Alicent's cousin. Ormond is Daeron's uncle. And so he's been raising Daeron. And now we finally get to see them together. I'm very curious what Daeron's natural hair color is, because Daeron currently has auburn hair, like his mother Alicent, but the fake Daeron from the previous episode had dyed pale Targaryen hair. And why would you dye the fake Daeron's hair blonde unless the real Daeron has blonde hair? And, like, Rhaenyra and the family would probably know what Daeron's real hair color is. Like, that wouldn't be a secret. Like, the prince's hair color would probably be well known. And it's interesting because hair color's important. Like, a whole bunch of the controversy around Rhaenyra is that her bastard children have dark hair, not Targaryen blonde hair, because they are bastards. So hair color's important. So I'm just curious whether Daeron has naturally blonde hair or dark hair. It would be kind of funny and ironic if Daeron had dark hair, not Targaryen blonde. But anyway, we'll talk about all that stuff. Let's quickly do a geography corner as well, shall we? Let's do a geography corner, because a lot of this episode is set in Tumbleton. So Tumbleton is a market town that's very close to King's Landing. So you can see on screen, King's Landing is where Rhaenyra is, it's where the throne is, and Tumbleton is this town over here that is just to the southwest of King's Landing, and it's the mouth of the Mander River. So the Mander is this river that goes through the Reach, goes past Highgarden and Bitterbridge and Tumbleton, and so Ormond and his army have been marching from Old Town, which is down here, all the way up the Mander to King's Landing, and so now they're at Tumbleton. Like, they're on Rhaenyra's doorstep. They are real close to Rhaenyra. But they are holding up in this town, Tumbleton, and holding its people hostage as a way of trying to resist Rhaenyra. And up here is Harrenhal, and that's where Gwaine and Kristen and Alice are currently. And up here is the Vale. So the Vale is where Daemon goes and finds Rhaena and Sheepstealer. This was your geography corner. Okay, so we see Tumbleton. And I really like the architecture of Tumbleton. It's very interesting looking with like these stepped rooftops. I wonder what the inspiration was here for this architectural style. It looks interesting, doesn't it? But we get to see this town, and the Hightower army is arriving. There's something like 15,000 or 10,000 Hightower soldiers, and they've all got to sleep somewhere. One of the things that makes these Game of Thrones stories different to a lot of fantasy is that Game of Thrones thinks about some of the logistical, practical concerns, like, you know, where do the soldiers sleep? How do the soldiers eat? How do we do supply lines? Like, there's a lot of sort of gritty, realistic considerations in these stories, I think, that make everything feel a bit more realistic and a bit more grounded. And so we have the Hightowers staying in the homes of the people of Tumbleton. And one of these families is the family of Cat. So this woman is Cat, and Cat is the wife of Hugh. Hugh is the dragon rider who rides the giant dragon Vermithor. So like last season, Hugh and Cat were in King's Landing, and they were doing their best to protect their daughter and to get by when King's Landing was suffering from a food shortage. But Cat and Hugh's daughter was sick, and Cat and Hugh's daughter died. And Cat and Hugh then had a disagreement, where Cat was saying, let's go to Tumbleton, we can stay with my brother and we'll be safe. And Hugh wanted to go and claim a dragon, because Hugh knew that he was the bastard son of a Targaryen woman. So Hugh went and got Vermithor, Cat went to Tumbleton. And tragically, ironically, Cat came to Tumbleton for safety, but she is not safe in Tumbleton because the Hightowers have taken over. And in this episode, this soldier, Garrick, tries to rape Cat. So tragically, she's not safe here. And we see her family life as these soldiers are intruding, and we get to know her brother a bit. And ultimately, her brother is killed by Daeron Targaryen. Apparently, the brother's name is Leo, according to the inside the episode. So Cat and her brother Leo and his family. So we see Lord Ormond Hightower, who takes a meeting with the Lord and Lady of Tumbleton from a bath, which is such a wonderful power move. It's like the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen in Dune, in the new Villeneuve movies, takes a meeting in a bath. It's like Geralt in The Witcher 3. And so we see that Lord and Lady Footleigh are very uncomfortable with having the Hightowers taken over because the Footleighs are loyal to Rhaenyra and Team Black. So Lord Glendon Footleigh is a bit cowardly about it, and he's like, ooh, please don't take over our castle. Whereas Lady, what's her name? Sharys Footleigh? Lady Footleigh says, well, we support Rhaenyra. Lady Sharys is more bold, and she's defiant, and she tells Daeron that we do not accept you, and we do not approve of you taking over our home. And so remember that, like, this war is partly a gender war. Part of the reason why people are fighting against Rhaenyra is that Rhaenyra is a woman. And many people in Westeros believe that only men should rule. And this is something we saw at the very beginning of this show in Season 1, Episode 1, when the Lords got together to decide whether the next ruler would be Rhaenys Targaryen, a woman, or Viserys Targaryen, a man. And Rhaenys was further up in the line of succession, but the Lords chose Viserys instead, largely because he was male. And Rhaenyra, in Season 1, felt frustrated by, like, this patriarchal, sexist world and said she wanted to do something about it. Rhaenyra said, I will make a new order. So that's one of the subtextual things going on here, is that it continues to be, like, a gendered war. And I wonder, like, if Rhaenyra successfully will make change or not. So we see Lord and Lady Footleigh and Ormond kind of does a power move by getting out of the bath and sort of waving his high tower in their faces. He's quite, like, sexual the way that he puts on his dressing gown, and it's like this confidence thing of showing his naked body to the Lord and Lady. And then Ormond gets a letter from Lord Boros Baratheon. So you might remember in Season 1, Episode 9, Boros Baratheon is the leader of Storm's End. Season 1, Episode 10, here he is. He's the Lord of Storm's End. He's the Lord of the Stormlands. And in Season 1, Episode 10, Rhaenyra sent Luke to try and make an alliance with Lord Boros Baratheon. But Boros rejected Luke and instead sided with Aemond Targaryen for Team Green. Because Aemond made a marriage alliance. Aemond agreed to marry Boros's daughter, Floris Baratheon. Ormond mentions Floris here, referring to Floris as a horse-faced daughter of Boros Baratheon. And it was immediately after this that Luke was killed by Aemond and Vhagar. So this is Boros, and since they made this marriage alliance, the Hightowers and the Greens were expecting that Boros would send an army to come and help them with the war. But now Ormond is getting a message saying that Boros is not coming and he is not helping. And Ormond mentions that Boros is illiterate. So Ormond says, oh, maybe we should send a letter with drawings instead of letters. Because, as we saw in Season 1, Episode 10, Boros can't read, and he gets his maester to read for him. So Ormond is frustrated throughout this episode that he thought that Boros was coming with an army, but he doesn't, and Ormond also thought that Aemond was coming with the dragon Vhagar, and he doesn't come. Aemond and Vhagar are AWOL in the Riverlands. So Ormond is having to improvise a new plan. Things are not going as he thought it would. So, yeah, we get the confirmation that this is Prince Daeron Targaryen, the fourth son of Viserys and Alicent, and Ormond is being kind of a father figure to Daeron, but he is a controlling, manipulative, harsh father figure, who I think is trying to use Daeron for his own power. The actor says as much in the behind-the-scenes feature. In the books, Daeron has already fought in battles on his dragon Tessarion. Tessarion is a small young dragon called the Blue Queen. In the TV show, we heard that Daeron has only recently started riding his dragon, so maybe Daeron hasn't fought in battle yet. Like, I kind of get the sense that when Daeron kills Leo at the end of this episode, I get the sense that is the first person who Daeron has ever killed, is the sense I get. Whereas at this point in the books, Daeron is a bit more battle-tested. And yeah, it's interesting that Daeron has dark hair. That some people have some crazy theories. Like, some people theorize that Daeron is actually the bastard son of Alicent with Criston Cole, which would be kind of wild. I don't think that's true, but it's an interesting theory. So in King's Landing, Queen Rhaenyra and her council hear that Ormond has taken over Tumbleton, and Rhaenyra is like, why is he doing that? Rhaenyra says that Ormond has painted a rondel on his chest. A rondel is a circular piece of armor that goes over a weak point on your armor. And so by saying a rondel on his chest, I think Rhaenyra is saying that Ormond is making himself a target. But she says that what Ormond wants, well, like, Ormond is daring her to come and attack Tumbleton with dragons. And Rhaenyra says that, well, if we attack this town full of civilians with dragon fire, hundreds of innocent people are going to die. And if Rhaenyra kills hundreds of innocent people, people will see her as a monster and a villain, and they will reject her as queen. They will compare her to King Maegor the Cruel. King Maegor the Cruel is Rhaenyra's, like, great-great-grand uncle. Maegor the Cruel went to war against the Faith of the Seven, and Maegor was famously terrible and evil. So Rhaenyra doesn't want to be like Maegor up here in the family tree. Of course, like, in this same episode, we're reminded that Aemond burned Sharp Point last season. This was Season 2, Episode 8. Aemond burned an entire town of people in Sharp Point. So, like, so Aemond has already done the evil thing that Rhaenyra is trying not to do here. I wonder if the realm will, like, reject Aemond for his crimes in the same way that Rhaenyra might be rejected for hers, or if there's a double standard happening here. This is similar to Game of Thrones Season 8, because in Game of Thrones Season 8, Daenerys and her dragons wanted to take King's Landing, but everyone said that, well, you can't attack King's Landing with dragons, or thousands of people, innocent people, will burn. And, like, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, it seemed to me that it probably would have been possible to attack, like, just the Red Keep and not the entire city, Because, like, what happens in Game of Thrones Season 8, spoilers for Game of Thrones Season 8, is that Daenerys just decides to burn thousands of innocent civilians for no good reason. So that, like, never made much sense to me in Game of Thrones Season 8, and I'm not sure if it makes perfect sense now, because Rhaenyra's counselors tell her, instead of attacking Tumbleton with dragons, you should attack Tumbleton with the army of River Lords, led by Lord Oscar Tully, that Daemon rallied last season. And they say that, well, fewer people will die, or fewer civilians will die, if you attack Tumbleton with an army instead of with dragons. But, like, we have repeatedly seen that when you attack a town with an army, innocent people die as well. Like, there often is murder and assault and plunder happening when an army of men attacks. So, like, you know, I'm not sure I'm convinced that it makes sense that attacking a town with dragons is necessarily going to kill more people than if you attack it with an army, but that's what this story is at the moment. So Rhaenyra is hoping to be responsible and hoping to be merciful, and trying to have the moral high ground. Rhaenyra talks to Orwyle, who was the Grand Maester for her father, King Viserys, and then was the Grand Maester for Aegon. And now Rhaenyra says, you can continue being the Grand Maester for me. Because Rhaenyra wasn't sure if she could trust Orwyle, because Orwyle did work for the enemy, but Orwyle seems to be honest and seems to be loyal enough to Rhaenyra, so she allows him to stay. That is, like, meant to be how maesters work. Like, a maester does not swear to obey a lord, a maester swears to obey a castle, and whoever is in control of that castle, the maester is meant to obey them. So, like, remember in Game of Thrones and in the books, the maester Luwin is the Winterfell maester. And so when Theon Greyjoy takes over Winterfell, Luwin obeys Theon. So, like, in theory, whoever is in charge, whoever takes over the castle, the maester is meant to obey them. So Orwyle is meant to be loyal to Rhaenyra. This is different to the books. So in the books, Rhaenyra keeps Gerardus, who was the guy on Dragonstone, as her Grand Maester, but here in the show, she's changing to Orwyle. Orwyle reaches for one of the balls on the small council table. So there are these, like, round balls that are symbolic of the different positions in the small council. So, like, the Master of Laws, the Master of Ships, the Master of Coin, the Hand of the Queen. They all have, like, a different colored ball that represents their position. But Rhaenyra says, we will have no balls. Those are relics of old regimes. We will not have balls. Her father Viserys used the balls, and her half-brother Aegon used the balls, but she says no balls. And I think it's fun that the first ever female ruler has no balls at her council. I think that might be deliberate. Rhaenyra says that to fix their money problems, they'll get a new Master of Coin. She wants to make Torrhen Manderley the Master of Coin. So we met Torrhen in the previous episode. He was that sort of smooth-talking lord from the north, who was at the banquet with the rats. And so she says that they'll make him Master of Coin, and if they continue to have money problems, they will just blame Torrhen and use him as a scapegoat. So we'll see how that turns out. Meanwhile, Daemon is flying around getting gold. They desperately need money, so they send Daemon to the Vale to get money from Lady Jane Arryn. I feel like they should take gold from other places as well. Like, the Lannisters at Casterly Rock have lots of gold, and they might have the gold, like the treasury. They might have the crown's treasury, because Tywin Lannister moved the money around. So, like, it seems pretty obvious that, like, the Lannisters are a good place to get gold. I hope that they try that later. So then Rhaenyra talks to Alicent. Because Alicent is the cousin of Ormond, and so Rhaenyra's like, who is this guy? How can I defeat him? And Alicent says she doesn't know Ormond very well, but Ormond thinks himself a scholar. He, like, studies the histories, and he likes art. It reminds me of how Aemond in Season 1 said that he studied philosophy and studied the histories. They seem like a similar personality. I wonder if they would get along. And Alicent says that Gawain thought Ormond cruel. So remember that Gawain is another cousin of Ormond. Gawain and Alicent are the children of Otto Hightower, while Ormond is the son of Hobart Hightower. And I find it really interesting that Alicent says that Gawain thought Ormond cruel, but Gawain thought that of many people. I get the sense that Gawain feels like a little bit of a black sheep in the family, perhaps, because Gawain said that Alicent was Otto's favorite, and Alicent was, for most of her life, very obedient to Otto. Otto controlled Alicent closely, whereas Gawain, it seems, felt a bit left out. And so, when Alicent says that Gawain thought many people cruel, I wonder if Gawain thought that Otto was cruel, which in some ways he was. So it's a really interesting insight into this messed up little family of Hightowers. In the Godswood, we also see a Kingsguard. There's a new Kingsguard, or Queensguard rather, protecting Rhaenyra. They haven't told us who this guy is yet in the episodes, but I think this is Adrian Redfort is the name of this Kingsguard, I think, based on casting news. We also get to see Helena playing with her daughter Jaehaera. So remember that Helena and Aegon had two children named Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. Jaehaerys was murdered in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2. And now Helena is pregnant with another child, who I suppose is also the child of Aegon, which is a whole big problem. In the books, Jaehaera and Jaehaerys have 12 fingers on each hand, so they're a little bit freaky. Maybe incest is bad. Freaky's the wrong word, I'm sorry. So we see them playing under the heart tree, the weirwood tree in the Godswood. And I think it's really interesting that Helena likes hanging out in the Godswood, because Helena has visions of the future, or she knows things about the future, and weirwoods are a source of magic from the old gods, and green seers can see the future, like Alice gets Daemon to see visions through the weirwood. So it's interesting seeing the magical, mystical Helena in this magical, mystical place with this magical, mystical tree, and I wonder how that all connects. I wonder if we'll get more weird visions and magic from Helena in this season. So Alicent says that she sent Daeron, her son Daeron, away to Old Town, and it was her choice, and she wanted this, and she did this because she wanted one of her children to be a Hightower. Her sons Aegon and Aemond and Helena are very much Targaryens. They are royals. They are in this political world, and Alicent hoped that Daeron could be her one child who is free of that and gets to live a different kind of life in Old Town. Aegon and Aemond have turned out to be murderers and pretty terrible people, so she was hoping that, Daeron would be the one good son, the gentle, kind, sweet, moral son. And, we see that Daeron doesn't want to be a murderer, but Ormond, it turns out, is a pretty horrible parent figure and is abusive and controlling and turns Daeron into a murderer. So I think it's really tragic that Alicent here is saying, I thought that Daeron would be better off in Old Town, away from me. It's so sad that she's saying my best act of motherhood was to be separated from my child. But ironically, Daeron is perhaps not better off with Ormond. So it's very sad. Alicent ultimately says that Ormond is sensitive to odors. We've seen that Ormond didn't like the smell of that stinky messenger in an earlier episode. And Ormond in this episode, he even kind of recoils when Lord Footley stands before him and reaches towards him. Ormond kind of flinches. So Ormond has this really peculiar sensitivity to smells, and I wonder how this is going to pay off. That's not mentioned in the books, so I wonder how this smell thing is going to be important. So then we're with Corlys and his bastard son, Alan. Remember last season, Alan was angry at Corlys because Corlys didn't raise Alan and Adam. He ignored them throughout their whole childhood. But now Corlys is trying to fix that, and he's trying to acknowledge Alan and Adam as his sons. And he even wants Adam and Alan to be his heirs, the future rulers of Driftmark. And Corlys is Rhaenyra's Hand of the Queen, and he's meant to be helping Rhaenyra rule, but he is angry that Rhaenyra refused to legitimize Adam and Alan. Rhaenyra refused to make Adam and Alan wipe away their bastardy and to make them legitimate Valarions. And so Corlys is like, screw this, I'm going to go off and kill pirates instead. Which is like borderline treason. Like, the Hand of the Queen is not meant to just run off and do his own thing. Corlys is disobeying Rhaenyra here, which I think is a big deal. And it's also a pattern for Corlys. Corlys has done this before a lot. Whenever Corlys gets pissed off, he goes off and fights a war against pirates. That's what Corlys did in Season 1, Episode 3. That's what Corlys did in Season 1, Episode 8. Whenever he's angry, he goes and beats up pirates. That's his coping strategy, I guess. And it's similar as well to how Criston is going to war, because Criston is Aegon's Hand of the King. And instead of staying and governing, the Hand goes off to war. So in the same way, Rhaenyra's Hand, Corlys, is going off to war. So, like, these are the people who are meant to be running the realm. Like, this is meant to be the Ned Stark or the Tywin Lannister, the Hand who keeps things under control. But Rhaenyra doesn't have a hand, and Team Green doesn't have a hand, so everything's a giant mess. You can see that Corlys is wearing the dagger that he had made for Luke Velaryon. So I remember Rhaenyra's son Luke was Corlys's heir for a while, and Corlys had that dagger made for Luke, but Luke tragically died, and so it's cute how Corlys is hanging on to that dagger. Corlys tells Alan that he can stay and like be the Hand of the Queen or represent the Hand of the Queen in Corlys's absence. And Alan says, I don't know how to do that. Like, Alan is a sailor. He has no idea how to be a politician. But Corlys says, well, this is your chance to like prove yourself and to learn and to better yourself. So remember in Season 1, Corlys said that he built High Tide by the strength of his own back. Corlys believes that he's a self-made man because Corlys got all of his wealth by sailing all around the world. Corlys made 9 voyages, these 9 huge voyages where he traveled to Yi Ti, which Damon mentioned last episode, which is Game of Thrones China. Corlys even went to Ashai, which is like the furthest easternmost, most mysterious place in this world. Corlys went everywhere, and he used those voyages to make money and to get power and to establish trade. And so Corlys thinks of himself as like, you know, a self-made billionaire. That's who he thinks he is. And he encourages Alan to do the same thing. I imagine that Alan would like a bit more help or a bit more guidance if he's going to like sit on the small council. But Alan does have some good ideas. Like in this episode, Alan says, well, if we've got too many rats in the castle, let's get some cats. Like, hey, Alan is already solving problems. I feel like Alan is already more useful than Corlys was as Hand of the Queen. Corlys did not do very much of use recently, I feel. I mean, Corlys did fight against Shariko successfully in the Battle of the Gullet, but like Corlys didn't do a whole lot else in the previous season. So hey, maybe fighting pirates is what Corlys should be doing. Alan says that anger is not something that can be ended with a blade. That's really interesting because, like, Corlys is trying to deal with his feelings by fighting a war, which is what he always does. But, like, Alan, when he was growing up, he also had a lot of anger. Alan was furious at Corlys for not being there and for not being a father and for leaving Alan in, like, relative poverty. And, you know, Alan, he never had the option of starting a war to deal with his feelings. Alan could do nothing about his feelings but brood, you know? And so Alan is someone who, like, knows that, like, he has a different way of coping, which is just, like, fuming, you know? And so they have, like, different outlets, different emotional makeups, I think, because of their different experiences. Anyway, so Corlys rides off to fight pirates, because remember those, like, Triarchy pirates attacked Larys and Aegon's caravan recently? And this all started like a season or more ago when Tyland was sent to go get the Triarchy to help Aemond and the Greens. And Criston and Alicent said, hey, maybe we should not invite a bunch of Captain Jack Sparrows to run amok in our kingdom. But that's what they did, and here are the consequences. Anyway, so Larys and Aegon arrive at Rook's Rest. So last season, Larys and Aegon escaped King's Landing because they were afraid that Aemond would kill Aegon and take Aegon's throne. And Larys wants to go to Braavos across the sea because Larys has all of the gold from Harrenhal in the Iron Bank of Braavos. And Larys says, let's just hang out there, go to the Winchester, have a pint, wait for this all to blow over. And then after the war, we can come back and we can make Aegon king again, and it'll be great. And I think that Larys might also plan to, like, betray Aegon or to sell Aegon to whoever wins the war as well. And things did not go to plan because they were attacked by the pirates, so now they've been walking through the woods. Larys wants to go to Duskendale and take a boat to Braavos, but Aegon wanted to come to Rook's Rest to see his dragon Sunfire, because last season Aegon and Sunfire were burned, and so Aegon wants to see if his dragon is okay. I feel like Larys used to be very powerful. Like, Larys used to be the Master of Whisperers, the Lord Confessor. He is the Lord of Harrenhal, the biggest castle in Westeros. At one point, Larys had a team of mute arsonists, his fireflies, with which he burned Harrenhal and burned Mazaria's house. Larys had a network of spies in King's Landing. He employed all the staff in the Red Keep. Larys had a lot of resources and a lot of people working for him, and now he appears to have lost all of that, and he's limping through the woods with Aegon. I feel like Larys should have had a backup plan here, you know? But I guess he wasn't expecting to be attacked by pirates on land in his raven cart. So Aegon and Larys find Sunfire. So remember, Sunfire was the most beautiful of the dragons. Sunfire was like a shining, opalescent, golden color. This was Sunfire in the last season. Sunfire looks magnificent and sounds magnificent. And we saw the beauty of Sunfire flying in Season 2, Episode 4, but then Sunfire was burned. And so now it appears that Sunfire is dead. And like multiple characters have said that Sunfire is dead. Sunfire has been long in the dying. Sunfire is dead and rotting. But Aegon says, no, Sunfire's alive. Get up, Sunfire. Get up, sir. But Sunfire doesn't get up. I think that they are protesting too much with the death of Sunfire. Like, they are saying a lot that, oh, Sunfire's definitely dead. And then Aegon's like, no, Sunfire's alive. Larys says the word resurrection this episode, so I do wonder if Sunfire might get up. We'll talk about this more in the spoiler zone at the end of this live stream. This live stream has no spoilers, except for the end, where we will have a quick spoiler zone. So, you know, in the books, there's a lot of suggestion that there's a magical connection between dragon and rider. It's like a psychic link. Like, you know how Bran can magically control animals? There are theories that dragon riders control dragons using a similar magic. So, you know, it might be that Aegon can, like, feel Sunfire's spirit in there somehow. So, you know, maybe Aegon knows something that we don't know about Sunfire. Although this is all different to the books. This is all different to the books. There are some men with the corpse of Sunfire who are demanding money for anyone who touches Sunfire. They are exploiting Aegon's dead dragon to make money, which I'm sure is very awful and insulting for Aegon. Larys claims that he's a man of the faith, which is a lie, but he's using that to protect himself because most people won't want to kill a priest. And there's something so ironic and messed up about Larys claiming to be a man of the faith, because Larys is such a depraved murderer and killer and torturer. So it's extra ironic for him to say that he's a man of the faith. And so they trudge on towards Rook's Rest to try and find information and to try and find a way to get to Braavos. I feel like they really shouldn't have left these horses behind. Because, like, later on in this episode, Larys is saying, oh, I think we should be able to get horses somewhere. There are horses right there, my dude. They should have, like, sold these horses. Because Larys has to give all these money to be able to stay at Rook's Rest. They should have used those horses, shouldn't they? Anyway, so then we're at Harrenhal. Criston Cole and Gwaine Hightower have this army of Crownlanders, and the plan was that they were going to attack Harrenhal together, along with Aemond and Vhagar. That was Criston and Aemond's plan since season 2. But when they arrive at Harrenhal, it's empty. And so we see Gwaine and Criston creeping slowly into the castle. And it's just like last season when Daemon crept into this castle with his sword. And then Aemond crept into this castle with his sword. And in every instance, the men creep in with their sword and they find Alice Rivers, the mysterious ghost of Harrenhal, the witch, the goat, the barn owl. Alice is delightfully mysterious. We don't know who or what Alice is. There is a bleating sound before Alice appears. There's been this goat whose name is Dell, and the goat keeps appearing when Alice appears. And so it seems like maybe Alice transforms into a goat. We've also seen green men, who are those antlered people with hooves walking around. Maybe Alice is a green man. Maybe Alice is a child of the forest. These are all creatures connected to the magic of the old gods, so she's connected to nature and the magic weirwood tree. She's very mysterious. Alice has outlasted Simon Strong and his gormless sons. She has outlasted Daemon and Aemond, just like Harrenhal has outlasted everyone. Harrenhal was burned and blasted 130 years ago, but she's still there. And I wonder if, in some sense, Alice represents the spirit or the ghost of Harrenhal, or of the weirwood trees that were cut down to build Harrenhal. I think Harrenhal, as a symbol, it represents the hubris and the arrogance of men who try to conquer the world and build these testaments to their legacies. Harrenhal is the largest castle in Westeros, and it was folly, because Harren was instantly burned by Aegon, and nobody holds Harrenhal for long. It seems cursed. So it's about the folly and the stupidity of trying to conquer, because nothing lasts forever. I'm excited to see Harrenhal. Because there's a play about Harrenhal very soon, put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company. And these are the characters who are going to appear in the Mad King play. Rhaegar, Lyanna, Elia, the Mad King Aerys, all of the Kingsguard, a young Jaime Lannister, Catelyn and Cersei are there in this play. So I'm excited to cover this play very soon. And so Gwaine and Criston meet Alice, and they're like, well, this is weird. Why is this one person in charge of this giant empty castle? And Alice reveals to Gwaine that Rhaenyra has taken King's Landing. And in the books, this is a surprise. It's like a trick that Daemon pulls on Aemond, is the way they play it in the books. Like, Aemond arrives at Harrenhal with the dragon and the army, and he's like, yeah, I've conquered Harrenhal. But then he finds out that in his absence, Daemon took King's Landing. And so in the books, it's kind of played as this trick on Aemond, whereas here it's this little surprise for Gwaine and Criston. And they ask where Aemond is, and Alice says, oh, he left. He fled. And that's curious, because last we saw Aemond, he was wounded. One of Simon Strong's sons stabbed Aemond in the back, and Aemond begged Alice for help, and now Aemond has apparently gone. So did Alice heal Aemond? Where did Aemond go? Vhagar is the biggest dragon in the world. He should be pretty easy to spot. You'd think someone would have seen him, but apparently he's just disappeared. So this is a big mystery. I wonder if Alice is playing some kind of magical trick here. And I wonder if Aemond is her prisoner, or if Aemond is just being selfish. It's unclear what's going on here. Fun mystery. Gwaine says, okay, the plan failed. We should go and meet up with Ormond and the Hightower army at Tumbleton. And Criston says, no, we've got to keep fighting. He wants to attack the army of Riverlords and prevent them from reaching King's Landing. And he talks about his honor. Like, Criston says that he says that he's different to Gwaine, because Gwaine is a highborn son of one of the most rich and powerful houses in this world, whereas Criston is a nobody. Everything he has is his Kingsguard honor, his knightly honor, and he feels super compromised because he broke his vow of chastity, having sex with Rhaenyra and then with Alicent, and then he murdered Joffrey Lonmouth at Laenor and Rhaenyra's wedding. And he almost committed suicide in season 1. Like, I think Criston feels that he is so compromised and so sullied and broken that all he's hoping for at this point is a glorious death in battle. There's no going home for him. There's certainly no safety if Rhaenyra wins. Like, if Rhaenyra wins this war, Gwaine will probably survive. A nice, important, highborn man like Gwaine, he'll probably be able to surrender and go home. Whereas Criston, he doesn't have a home to go back to. And so he's saying that, like, there's this difference in class and status between Gwaine and Criston. And Criston sees everything through the lens of his honor as a knight. And, like, Gwaine's sense of honor as a knight involves morality. Like, Gwaine was saying that we should stop people committing rape in Criston and Gwaine's army. Whereas Criston didn't care about that. Criston only cares about the war and winning. And he says that he'll fight dirty against the Rivermen. They're going to do like a guerrilla war against the Rivermen because all that matters is like getting that glorious death. And I think that Criston is excited about fighting that doesn't involve dragons. Because at Rook's Rest in Season 2, Episode 4, Criston saw that like ordinary human men don't really matter in the face of dragon power. So I think part of Criston is happy that he gets to die with a man-on-man battle rather than a dragon war. Whereas Gwaine is like, are you crazy? Gwaine is like, how about we just, live and try not to die and maybe surrender if we have to. I think that's more the vibe that Gwaine has. So I think that Criston and Gwaine are an interesting counterpoint. Like, Gwaine is a relatively sane person who like cares about morals a bit, whereas Criston is just like a swirling black hole of nihilism and despair, and he's bringing everyone else down with him. And it all started because he had those entanglements with Rhaenyra and Alicent, who like he messed him up so bad and he never quite got over it. So and Criston is meant to be the White Knight. He's meant to be the moral, pure Kingsguard, but he's not looking like a white knight right now. He's looking very dirtied and sullied, and his cloak is closer to grey, symbolizing how his moral purity has been compromised and dirtied. He feels like he has done crimes that he can never repent for. So then we are with Alan and Rhaenyra in the storage basement of the Red Keep. I wonder if this is the same basement where they keep the dragon skulls later on in the time of Game of Thrones. So Alan says that Corlys has gone off to fight pirates, and Rhaenyra is pretty chill about that. And they look on the model city that was built by Viserys. And so this was Viserys's great hobby, was, making his little model train set, little model train village, his little Warhammer set. He liked to play with his miniatures and build his little city. And Rhaenyra says that the city represented old Valyria, and it represented how all great empires fall. So thousands of years ago, the Valyrian Empire ruled much of the world, and there were dozens of dragon-riding families in Valyria, and the Targaryens were one of them. And the Valyrians seemed all-powerful, and they were quite evil. They killed a lot of innocent people. They enslaved a lot of innocent people. They did evil blood sorcery. And then they exploded. 400 years ago, it was the doom of Valyria, when Valyria mysteriously was suddenly destroyed in some strange magical cataclysm that may or may not have been caused by the Faceless Men. We've got an Alt-Shift-X video about the doom of Valyria, if you're interested. But the Valyrian Empire fell, and Rhaenyra is kind of saying that, well, if the Valyrian Empire can fall, then any empire can fall. It's a similar idea to the symbolism of Harrenhal. Harrenhal was the greatest castle, and it fell instantly. And so, we can never conquer forever. We can never be all-powerful forever. We can just do our best to try and leave a good legacy, and we've got to have some humility about the limits to our power. And so Rhaenyra is being very philosophical here. And last season, Aegon smashed Viserys's model city and broke a lot of it out of rage over the death of his son Jaehaerys. And so now Viserys's model, his city, his kingdom, is in ruins, which is a very clear symbol for how Viserys's legacy has fallen apart. King Viserys failed to keep the realm together, to keep the realm peaceful, and Rhaenyra has inherited a broken kingdom, inherited a broken legacy, and she's just got to do her best with the broken realm that Viserys gave her. So it's not easy. And I think it's interesting how Rhaenyra talks very positively of Viserys, even though Viserys really caused a lot of the problems that are haunting the realm right now. But at the end of the day, Rhaenyra loved her dad, even though her dad was very imperfect and very flawed. And that's something that many of the characters can relate to, I think. And so Alan and Rhaenyra talk about their dads in a similar way. There are rats everywhere in the Red Keep, because last season Aegon killed all the rat catchers, because one of the rat catchers killed his son Jaehaerys. And so there are rats everywhere, and the rats have been around since season 1, and the rats, I think, are a symbol of moral corruption. It's a bad omen. It's a sign that things are not going well. It's a sign of treachery, of moral filth. And there's a rat in the opening sequence now. Rats on the throne. So it's all bad vibes and bad signs. And Alan said, well, we can get rid of the rats with cats, because Alan was a sailor, and on boats they had cats to catch the rats. I think it's really fun how there's a long history of cats in the Red Keep. So like in the time of Game of Thrones, Arya chases cats in the Red Keep, the same place 170 years later. And in the books, there's even like a whole history to the cats. There was a cat named Balerion, who was the cat of Rhaenys Targaryen, the short-lived daughter of Rhaegar and Elia. And Rhaenys was like this formidable black tomcat. And then some 17 years later in Game of Thrones, Arya sees the same cat, or Tommen sees the same cat. And this same cat, Balerion, fights against Tommen's kitten, Sir Pounce. Tommen has these kittens named Sir Pounce and Boots and Lady Whiskers, which are wonderful names for cats. And so it's fun to think that maybe the ancestors or the descendants of, or the ancestors of these cats are the cats that Alan is about to introduce to the Red Keep. In the books, it's Otto who brings in the cats. He brings in 100 cats to replace the 100 rat catchers. But it's funny to think that like there might be a whole genealogy to the cats in the Red Keep. George R. R. Martin, the author, is a big lover of cats. There are cats in many of his stories. And so, yeah, big cat fan in Westeros. So Rhaenyra seems to accept Alan to her small council, and let's see if Alan can better himself and make himself useful to Rhaenyra's regime. Maybe Alan can prove himself a worthy heir, a worthy politician, potentially a true Velaryon, because Rhaenyra has so far refused to legitimize Alan, but maybe she will in future. It's funny that they don't talk about that at all this episode. It's not clear if Alan even wants to be legitimized as a Velaryon. Actually, well, yeah, he did say that he wants Corlys's name previously, but Adam is the one who seems more interested in getting status and getting power. So I wonder if Rhaenyra and Alan will talk about the legitimization issue. So then Aegon and Larys approach Rook's Rest. So in Season 2, Episode 4, this is where Aegon and his dragon Sunfire were burned by Aemond and Vhagar. This is also where Rhaenys and her dragon Meleys were killed. So we see the dead dragon Meleys in the ruins of Rook's Rest. And all of these people have gathered in Rook's Rest, and they're scavenging the battlefield and trying to profit from it. And in the disorder and the chaos of the war, the books often write about how soldiers can become outlaws. And in times of hunger and disarray and chaos, and there's not enough food and no one's enforcing laws, there's more crime, there's more desperation, people are trying to do what they have to do to survive. And I think with the corpse of Meleys here, It's so evocative. It's as though the people are like scavenging the corpse of the fallen dragon. It reminds me of the idea of a whale fall. Like in real biology in the oceans, when a whale dies, its corpse sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and then there are all these organisms that feed off the whale, and then there's organisms that feed off the organisms that feed off the whale, and there's this whole ecosystem that arises around the dead whale. And that's what this is like, with all these people coming to scavenge around the dead dragon. This is a dragon fall. The showrunner Ryan Condal compares this place to Dante's Inferno, like the circles of hell. Laris and Aegon are making this journey into this horrific, nightmarish hell realm where all of these people are suffering and doing evil and exploiting each other. This is a place of the dead and of the damned. So I think there's some really cool imagery going on here. At Rook's Rest, Laris and Aegon meet this man, Janos. So Janos is in charge of Rook's Rest, and it's not at all clear if Janos is meant to be in charge of Rook's Rest. Like, maybe Kristen said, okay, Janos, you're in charge of Rook's Rest while I'm gone. Like, maybe Janos was a soldier in Kristen's army. Like, Janos is wearing armor that I think looks like the Darklan armor, which is one of the houses that Kristen conquered on his conquests. So, like, maybe Kristen said that Janos is in charge of this place, or maybe Janos is just some random soldier who just made himself commander by bullying and killing. It's unclear. And this is something that happens a lot. There's stuff like in Harrenhal in the books, like a lot of random soldiers take over the castle by sheer brutality, and often like they're not getting proper orders or they disobey their orders and they do what they want, and soldiers turn to plunder and exploitation and assault, and things turn into a big ugly mess. And so that's what we see with Janos exploiting the people around him for his own profit. The name Janos is reminiscent of Janos Slynt in the main series, and Janos Slynt was a similarly selfish, bullying man. Janos says that he hates riverfolk. So riverfolk are the people from the Riverlands. So like currently Rook's Rest is in the Crownlands, and so these are like Crownlanders are the people who live here. And the Riverlands are like the central region where Harrenhal is, where the Tullys of Riverrun are, and you know, they're separate to the cultures of the Westermen, the Reachmen, the Stormlanders, the Dornish. So there's lots of like different, you know, nationalistic, xenophobic hatreds and rivalries between these different regions, which I think it's fun that the show reminds us that these are different places with different people. And sometimes they don't get along. There's this other guy named Tangletongue because he has a stutter. And in the books there is a character called Tangletongue, but I think he's a bit of a different character, and Janos doesn't exist in the books. So again, this is a very different story to what's happening in the books at this time. Janos takes gold from Laris, and Janos says that Laris and Aegon can stay if they work, and he forces Aegon to scoop poop and piss from the latrine pits, because they can use the urine in tanning leather, and they can use the poop for manure. Is human poop good for fertilizing? Like for agriculture? I don't know if it is, but that's what they do. And this is about like taking down Aegon's pride, right? Like Aegon has lost his throne, he has lost his dragon, he has lost much of his body with his injuries, he has lost his penis. Now he must lose his pride. Janos forces him to kiss his boot. So I think the question is like, what remains? Like when we take away everything that Aegon has, what is left? Who is he deep down? Can Aegon be better? Can Aegon be stronger? Or is he just hollow and empty and useless? Aegon is a pretty reprehensible person. Aegon murdered 99 innocent ratcatchers. Aegon raped Diana. Aegon is a bad person. And I wonder if it's possible for him to change in any way. And I think that's what they're going for with this arc. So then we are back in Tumbleton. So we are with Kat and her brother Leo and their family, and there's a bit of tension with the Hightower men who are staying here. And the Hightower men say, we'll party here, and it'll be better than Honeyholt. So Honeyholt is the castle of House Beesbury. In season 1, Lord Lyman Beesbury was killed by Kristen Cole, and the Beesburys were a bit buzzed about that. They were a bit annoyed, and so we heard in season 2 that House Beesbury was attacking the Hightowers. So, like, in the books, there's this whole campaign that the Hightowers fight as they fight their way through the Riverlands against these against these Reach houses who were siding with Rhaenyra. And so apparently the Hightower army defeated the Beesburys off-screen. In the books, this was a battle at the Honeywine River, the Honeyholt Castle on the Honeywine River, ruled by House Beesbury. And so, yeah, it seems like they must have been defeated off-screen. In A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, we saw Sir Humphrey Beesbury, who had a charmingly stripy armor, yellow and black armor, and also had a dyed yellow moustache. So I think that Beesbury is sort of a meme fan favorite house, and so it's always fun to hear about them. So there's tension between the Hightowers and Kat's family, and then this soldier, Garrick, tries to rape Kat. And Kat's brother, Leo, and Leo's wife try to defend Kat, and they attack the Hightowers, and it's really horrible. I think this is the third sexual assault of the season in 4 episodes, after a man raped someone in Gwaine and Kristen's camp, and then Lord Jasper Wilde tried to rape Alicent. So this is something that comes up a lot in the books and the shows, which is that in these times of war and killing, there is also sexual assault. And one of the questions that the stories often ask is, like, what do the rulers do about that? So, you know, in Game of Thrones Season 1, Daenerys protects the Lazarene from rape by the Dothraki. She protects Mirri Maz from sexual assault. In the books, Stannis also kills rapists. In the show, Jon Snow kills rapists in Season 4 and in Season 8. So this is one of those, like, questions, is like, what does a ruler do about this kind of evil? And we see that Ormond says that he'll punish Garrick, but Ormond also kills Leo, which is really messed up, because Leo was only trying to defend Kat. So it goes to show Ormond's approach to justice, which is a fairly brutal one, and I think an immoral one, in which he doesn't really care about morality. So Kat is Hugh's wife, and Hugh knows that Kat is stuck in Tumbleton under Hightower occupation. So Hugh comes and says, hey, Rhaenyra, I want to go and watch Tumbleton, because Rhaenyra wants to, like, keep an eye on the Hightowers and attack them if they get up to anything. She wants to know what's going on, but she doesn't want to attack with dragons. And Rhaenyra says that she sent Ulf to Tumbleton because Ulf is not emotionally involved in Tumbleton. Rhaenyra knows that Hugh is in love with Kat and will want to protect Kat, and that's why she didn't send Hugh there, because she wants someone who isn't emotionally involved. Like, this is the classic Game of Thrones moral dilemma. Love versus duty. In Game of Thrones, Jon Snow loves Ygritte, but he also has his duty to the Night's Watch, and he's torn, and he's forced to choose between his love and his duty. And so I think there's a similar question here. What happens if Hugh has to choose between his love for Kat and his duty to Rhaenyra? I think that's a really important question going forwards. Rhaenyra allows Hugh to go and watch Tumbleton, so we'll see how that plays out. I think it's cool how Rhaenyra is, like, you know, she is thoughtful and perceptive. She knows that Hugh is emotionally involved with Tumbleton. She wants someone who is not emotionally involved. She's thinking carefully about this stuff. And we'll see how it plays out. Then we're with Ulf, the other dragon rider, the dragon rider of Silverwing. And they see some graffiti on a wall that says Queen of Bastards. And next to the graffiti, there's this blue, red, and green stripe. So those colors, those shapes, are on the sigil of House Strong. And the father of Rhaenyra's children, Jace, Luke, and Joff, was Harwin Strong. So that problem of Rhaenyra's children being bastards is still a problem. This is what Rhaenyra was worried about. This is why Rhaenyra refused to legitimize Adam and Alan, because Rhaenyra's kids are already seen as illegitimate bastards, and that's been a problem for her legitimacy for this entire show. And so she can't go around legitimizing the bastards Adam and Alan. She's already got the bastards Hugh and Ulf and Adam riding dragons. If she also goes legitimizing bastards, it just increases this perception and this narrative that Rhaenyra is the family and the team of bastards. And it might invite more accusations that Joffrey, her last remaining son with Harwin, her heir to the throne, this kid Joffrey is her heir to the throne. And if people start calling him a bastard, that's going to be a huge problem for her and for Joffrey. So that's why Rhaenyra is so insecure about this bastard stuff. And that's why Rhaenyra sends men to try and stop the graffiti and to try and prevent this treasonous speech. And unfortunately, Luther Largent and the Gold Cloaks are way too brutal in their putting down of this sedition. So it really like hits a nerve for Rhaenyra and creates this difficult situation. But I mean, on the street, we see how Ulf and this kid are illiterate. They can't read this graffiti. It's only this like fancier man who is able to read. So it's like, how dangerous is the graffiti if most people can't even read it? I wonder if Rhaenyra is making this more of a problem than if she was just keeping it quiet. But anyway, Ulf goes back to his pub. So remember last season, Ulf used to come to this pub and drink with his friends, Muja and Clay. And Ulf used to get free drinks because he told everyone he was a Targaryen bastard. And now that he's a dragon rider, people are getting him to pay for the drinks. And he has a good time at the pub, and this is where he wants to be. He's in his element. He's having a good time. And so that's why it's so upsetting when Rhaenyra says that he's not allowed to go to the pub anymore. Breaks Ulf's heart. So then, Cat and Leo and his family come and demand justice for the attempted rape by Garrick of Cat. And Ormond says that he'll punish Garrick. Is it Garrick or Garrick? I don't know if it was Garrick or Garrick. Garrick. It's Garrick. So they try and get justice for Garrick's attempted rape of Cat. And Ormond says, all right, an eye for an eye. He says he will geld Garrick, cut off his penis. And he says that he will break Garrick's arm because Garrick broke Leo's sister's arm. So it looks like Ormond is doing justice. Quite a eye for an eye, biblical corporeal form of justice. And so Cat and Leo's family are relieved and pleased. But later, Ormond forces Daeron to kill Leo as well. So, like, you know, it seems as though Ormond is more interested in the appearance of law and order. He's more interested in control than he is in morality. He certainly is not merciful to Leo. You can see that Bold John Roxton has these men who are like all uniformed in like Roxton armor. So like these rings and the blue are Roxton colors. So it's cool that he's got this like force of uniformed bodyguards that seem to be his like personal guard. I wonder what their deal is. Remember that Bold John Roxton, he's the guy with the bowl cut. And Bold John Roxton has a Valyrian steel sword called Orphan Maker, while Ormond has a Valyrian steel sword called Vigilance. So all through these scenes, Ormond is teaching Daeron. Like, Ormond says, we have to be firm and harsh, and we have to be strong, and that's how you must rule. So, like, Ormond is grooming Daeron for rule and for command, and he's teaching Daeron to be like him, and to be harsh like him. And we see how, you know, Daeron is uncomfortable with Ormond's brutality and his murders. So, you know, Daeron's morality is clashing with Ormond's evil. So Rhaenyra is trying to understand Ormond. Who is this guy who's taken over Tumbleton, and how can Rhaenyra defeat him? And Rhaenyra asks if the Hightowers control the faith. So the Hightowers, Lord Ormond, is control of the city of Old Town. So Old Town is one of the biggest, richest cities in Westeros. I think the biggest and richest, bigger and richer than King's Landing. It's much more sort of fancy and a bit more sort of advanced and clean than King's Landing is, which is a bit more of a mess. And so Old Town is the seat of the faith. The Starry Sept is like the Vatican, and it is at Old Town. So the Hightowers and the faith have always had a very close relationship for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The citadel of the Maesters is also there. So Old Town is a seat of learning and education and religion. I guess it's Rome. It's like Rome. And so Rhaenyra's like, okay, well, do the Hightowers control the faith? Because previously the High Septon told Rhaenyra that he would not anoint her. The Septon said that the faith would not support Rhaenyra, at least not until they see that Aegon is in fact dead. And all while, he is the Grand Maester. He would have studied at Old Town, at the Citadel. He should know about these things. And so he says that, the faith is closely tied to the Hightowers. He says that the faith is to the Hightowers as the dragons are to the Targaryens, which I think is a really interesting comparison. Like, he's saying that religion, like dragons, is a kind of metaphysical power that is difficult to control. Remember in Game of Thrones Season 5 when Cersei empowered the faith and the High Sparrow? Cersei tried to use the faith for her advantage, and it backfired, and the Sparrows imprisoned Cersei. So, religion can be like a chaotic force that's difficult to use. It's powerful, but it's difficult to use. And it's the same as dragons. Like Daemon says this episode, dragons are not a precise instrument. And so I think, it's all metaphors for the nature of power. Like, what this world is about, what these stories are about, is the nature of power and how power it can be based on image, it can be based on appearance, it can be based on force, it can be based on personality. But power is difficult, and power causes collateral damage, and power can change the self. To be a king and to wield power changes you. That's what Alicent said last episode. So Orwell ultimately says that, the faith and the Hightowers are connected, but the Hightowers don't control the faith, is what Orwell says. 100 years ago, there was a war between King Maegor the Cruel, who Rhaenyra mentioned this episode, and the faith. The Targaryen king fought a war against the faith, and it didn't go well for anyone, really. But at one point, the High Septon died, and Old Town surrendered to King Maegor. And there are many theories on who killed the High Septon, but one theory in the books is that the Hightowers might have killed the High Septon 100 years ago. So, there certainly has been, conflict and disagreement between the Hightowers and the faith in the past. And I think Rhaenyra is wise to be thinking carefully about this, because pissing off the faith is a problem for Targaryen rulers. Orwell suggests that they could kill the High Septon, and Rhaenyra is surprised that Orwell is suggesting murdering the Pope. Orwell's a pretty low-key guy, but he is, morally flexible, and he is resourceful, and he can be shady, like when he helped smuggle Alicent to Rhaenyra. So, I'm interested in, who Orwell truly serves. It seems like Orwell genuinely cared about Viserys. Orwell was suggesting different treatments for King Viserys' disease in Season 1, and Orwell saved Alicent from sexual assault earlier. Orwell seems to be genuinely trying to help whoever it is that he's serving. So yeah, maybe he is loyal to whoever is in the Red Keep. Orwell seemed to care about Aegon's health as well after Aegon's injuries. Orwell seems to just genuinely want to help whoever is in command. But yeah, I wonder if his loyalties will ever change. And Orwell suggests that, you might not need the support of the faith necessarily, because Rhaenyra has the throne, Rhaenyra has 6 dragons, she has the power, she might not need the support of the faith, at least not right now. So then, we're in the Vale. So the Vale of Arryn is ruled by Lady Jane Arryn. Lady Jane Arryn is the same family as Lysa Arryn, who was the woman in the Eyrie who had that, Sweet Robin was breastfeeding from Lysa in Game of Thrones Season 1, memorably. And so that's the same family. I love her costume here. I love her big white cape. It looks like a falcon, which is the symbol of House Arryn. So Jane Arryn talks with Daemon. Daemon has come here on his dragon Caraxes to demand gold, because Rhaenyra needs gold. And Jane and Daemon talk a bit about their history. They sort of imply that there's been a history of tension and conflict between Daemon and Jane Arryn. Like, Jane reminds us of the death of Daemon's first wife, Rhea Royce. So in season 1, Daemon killed Rhea Royce. And, you know, a lot of people suspected that Daemon, in fact, murdered Rhea Royce, which he did. So I wonder if Jane Arryn knows or suspects that Daemon killed Rhea Royce. Certainly there's a history of, like, conflict here. I mean, after Rhea's death, Daemon said that he would go to Jane Arryn and he would demand to inherit Runestone, the castle of House Royce, of his wife Rhea. Now, it's not explicitly clear if Daemon ever did demand Runestone of Jane Arryn, but certainly they imply that there's a history of bullshit between Jane and Daemon. Jane wants to get rid of Daemon, and so ultimately Daemon says, well, if you give me money, I'll go away. And that's when Jane is like, okay, fine. Take the money and go. Jane did make a deal with Rhaenyra and Team Black. Jane said that she would send an army, the Knights of the Vale, an army from the Vale would come and support Rhaenyra, and in return, Rhaenyra would give Jane a dragon and a dragon rider to protect the Vale. And Jane complains that Rhaenyra did not give her a proper dragon. She only got Tyraxes, which was the dragon of Joffrey Velaryon, and Tyraxes was too young to be useful. Stormcloud as well, the dragon of young Aegon the Younger. So Rhaenyra didn't really exactly keep her promise, so Jane decided not to keep her promise, and she never sent an army. So instead, Daemon's like, give me some gold. And on the way out, Daemon is happily putting these sacks of gold onto his dragon Caraxes, and Caraxes disobeys Daemon. Caraxes flies off in a different direction. I guess Caraxes senses or smells Sheepstealer and Rhaena nearby. Maybe dragons have some kind of psychic perception of dragons and dragon riders. And this is the first time that we've seen Caraxes disobey Daemon. In season 1, we saw Vhagar disobey Aemond. In season 3, we saw Sheepstealer disobey Rhaena. Like, those were both young people who were not very experienced controlling their dragons. But now Daemon, who is a very experienced dragon rider, who has been with Caraxes for decades, fails to control Caraxes. And so it goes to show that even the most experienced dragon riders can never quite control their fire-breathing lizards. And that's what Viserys said in season 1, episode 1, that the dragons can't be controlled. Fire is dangerous and chaotic. So, as Daemon says, dragons are not precise instruments. So Daemon finds Rhaena with the dragon Sheepstealer. There's an extremely cool shot of, like, the firelight behind Rhaena that looks pretty cool. And then Daemon confronts his daughter. So remember that Rhaena and Baela are the children of Daemon with Laena. Laena died in season 1 during a childbirth that didn't go well. And so Baela and Rhaena, in the books, they're twins. I don't know if they're twins in the show. But Baela and Rhaena are Daemon's and Laena's daughters. And Daemon seems to be a pretty terrible dad. He paid more attention to Baela than to Rhaena growing up, because Baela has the dragon Moondancer, whereas Rhaena didn't have a dragon. And Daemon seemed to not respect or not be interested in Rhaena because she didn't have a dragon. And so Rhaena now finally gets to express to Daemon that she's furious, that she was always ignored, she was pitied, she was the babysitter for her half-brothers Aegon and Viserys. She feels like she was never appreciated, and that's why she finally gets this cool teenage rebellious moment of saying, screw you, Dad, you always ignored me, so now I'm just gonna live in a cave with my dragon, Dad. Screw you, Dad. It's such a great authentic moment of teenage rebellion, I feel. And this completely frazzles Damon's brain. Like, Damon is really shook by this, because Damon realizes he was wrong. I mean, Damon was not only wrong to have ignored his daughter and to have failed to be there for her, but also Damon was wrong about dragons, because Damon said he thought it was impossible to claim a wild dragon. There are a bunch of wild dragons, including Sheep Stealer and Grey Ghost and Cannibal are the names of the wild dragons. And Damon did mention the 3 wild dragons back in season 1. And Damon said that it's impossible to tame a wild dragon, but Rhaena has done it, which is like the most consequential, like amazing thing for Damon, because Damon's like the dragon guy. He's the guy who was climbing around Dragonstone in season 1, collecting eggs like Pokemon. Like, he was like, his favorite thing is dragons. The most happy we've ever seen Damon is when he was collecting dragon eggs on Dragonstone, and he's so proud of his identity as a dragon rider with Caraxes. And he thought that Rhaena failed as a dragon rider. He thought that it was impossible to claim the wild dragons. But now his daughter has done the impossible, and he wasn't there for her when she needed his guidance. Imagine if Damon was there to help Rhaena claim Sheepstealer, to help Rhaena learn to command Sheepstealer. Like, the others have had lessons, dragon riding lessons from the Dragon Keepers. We saw how Jace and Luke and Aegon got lessons to control their dragons, and Rhaena desperately needed that. Maybe if Damon was there for Rhaena, maybe Rhaena would have been able to control Sheepstealer better, and then Sheepstealer would not have disobeyed Rhaena and attacked her own side at the Battle of the Gullet in Season 3, Episode 1. Because now, since Sheepstealer attacked the wrong team, Rhaena feels that she'll be blamed by Rhaenyra for the death of Jace. Rhaena doesn't want to go back because she thinks that she'll be blamed. And so Damon's like, well, maybe you can go to Pentos. Because Pentos is where Aegon and Viserys are, the young children of Rhaenyra and Daemon. And so Daemon's like, well, go to Pentos and stay with Aegon and Viserys, which is where Rhaena's meant to be, and leave Sheepstealer behind, and we'll cover up this mistake and pretend it never happened. But Rhaena's like, no, Sheepstealer is a part of me. Once you've bonded with a dragon, it seems to be a bond for life. Except with Laenor. In the show, Laenor abandons Seasmoke, and that's the first time we've ever seen a dragon rider separate from their dragon like that, which is interesting. But yeah, Rhaena says, no, I'm a dragon rider now. I'm never giving that up. Rhaena's hair is shorter. I wonder if Rhaena cut her hair or if Sheepstealer burned Rhaena's hair. I don't know. But she's living wild in the cave. And I don't know what Rhaena's going to eat. I don't know if Rhaena's just going to eat like burned mutton for the rest of her life. But for the moment, she's having this sort of teenage rebellion of defying Daemon and defying Rhaenyra and feeling like an exile forever. It's a bit Jon Snow, actually. It's like how Jon Snow in Book 1 decides to run off and be an exile and to be an Oathbreaker, and he'll never be forgiven, and, you know, but maybe one day she'll try to reconcile. But Rhaena asks Daemon to lie to Rhaenyra. Rhaena says, tell Rhaenyra that I'm not here, say that I disappeared, let me do my thing with Sheepstealer, and that gives Daemon a moral dilemma. It's like a love versus duty thing. Will Daemon keep the secret out of love for his daughter Rhaena, or will Daemon do his duty to his queen and wife Rhaenyra and tell her the truth that Rhaena and Sheepstealer are there? And ultimately, Daemon decides to lie. Daemon brings a head of this goat herd and claims that he's killed Sheepstealer's rider. Daemon lies to his queen. And I wonder what consequences that will have. Rhaena's dragon Sheepstealer angrily rushes at Daemon, and I think here the dragon is expressing the emotions of the rider. Sheepstealer is embodying Rhaena's rage. Rhaena finally has the ability to express her emotions in a way that people will finally listen to. And so then Daemon looks down and sees this goat herd, and I think that this goat herd is who Daemon kills and claims was the rider of Sheepstealer. I think that's what's going on there. In season 2, Damon had a vision of his ex-wife Lena, and Lena said, "Have you been looking after our girls?" So this is something that has been a thread in the show for a while, is Damon's role as a father to Baylor and Rhaena. And so let's see if he can turn this around. I wonder if Damon can do better as a father without completely betraying Rhaenyra. I mean, Baylor has also felt neglected by Damon. Like, remember last season, Baylor was walking by Damon in the hall, and Baylor said, "Father?" And Damon just completely ignored her. It's like when Lena died in season 1, and Damon just walked away from Baylor and Rhaena. So he's been a pretty shit dad. So then we're back in Tumbleton with Lord Ormond, and Ormond is adding little scents and little nice-smelling things into his pomander. I think it's called a pomander, is that little orb that contains his nice-smelling things. There's a really cool audio effect here that I think represents the importance of these pleasant smells to Ormond. So they're really emphasizing this odors thing, and I wonder how this sensitivity might be used against him. I think it's a bit crazy that later on Ormond sees Leo burn in front of him. Ormond would smell this blood, Ormond would smell this roasting human flesh, and Ormond doesn't react to it at all. I would have thought that would stink, and I would have thought that Ormond would hate that smell, but maybe there's only some particular smells that Ormond dislikes. Like Ormond disliked the smell of that stinky messenger earlier. I don't know what the rules are here, but yeah, they're really emphasizing this. So Ormond gets the news from Gwaine that Aemond is not coming. And this ruins Ormond's plan. We don't know exactly what Ormond's plan was, but I guess that Ormond, he was expecting the Baratheons to come. He was expecting Aemond, and Vhagar to come. And I guess that Ormond's plan was to lure Rhaenyra's dragon riders and then to kill Rhaenyra's dragons with Vhagar. Because Team Green is outnumbered at this point. Team Green has 2 dragons. They have the biggest dragon, Vhagar, and they have a little dragon, Tessarion. Helaena has the dragon Dreamfire, who is big and powerful, but apparently Helaena doesn't ride Dreamfire, and we've barely seen Dreamfire in this show. And Aegon's dragon Sunfire appears to be dead, so it's basically only 2 dragons on Team Green, while Rhaenyra has at least 6 dragons: Syrax, Caraxes, Moondancer, Seasmoke, Vermithor, and Silverwing. So, the Greens are badly outnumbered, but I think that Vhagar is still the strongest dragon, and so I think that Ormond's best hope is to maybe lure Rhaenyra's dragons one by one so that Vhagar can kill them one by one. Maybe that's what Ormond was planning. But now Ormond learns that Aemond and Vhagar aren't coming, so Ormond is going to have to come up with a different plan. He's going to have to improvise. He's going to have to come up with something clever. But, Gwaine says that Ormond always has a canny plot afoot. So, Ormond gets this bad news, and he doesn't take it very well. Daeron warns this other servant to get out. So Daeron knows that Ormond has these violent tantrums, and he knows that this servant might be in danger from Ormond. I wonder if Ormond ever hurts or kills innocent people in his tantrums. It's this really sad, tragic thing where, Daeron, this young person, has had to learn to avoid the violent outbursts of his parent figure. This is a very abusive relationship between Daeron and his parent figure. And so Ormond has this big tantrum, and he attacks the table with his sword Vigilance. He really loses his shit, and then he puts everything back together. And John Roxton comes and puts the chair back up. So, this happens all the time. Ormond has these tantrums all the time. And it just shows how, false Ormond's sense of, order and propriety is. Ormond is all about the appearance of law and order and civility and morality, but it's not real, because deep down he is a violent, angry person. Ormond yells the C word, the one word that we're not allowed to say on YouTube. He yells the C word, and I think that leans into the misogyny of the character. Like, later, Ormond laughs at the idea that Rhaenyra is a female ruler, so he's a sexist as well, and yelling the C word, I think, is part of that. I think it's interesting how Ormond is similar to Daemon, because Daemon also has scenes where he gets a message and it's bad news, and his reaction is to have a violent outburst. Like in season 1, episode 3, Daemon attacks the messenger Adam when he hears that Viserys is coming to help. So, Daemon and Ormond are also these imperialist racists. Like, Daemon sort of talks as though the Valyrians are superior to all others, and we are gods, and we deserve to conquer the world. And Ormond says similar things this episode, where he says that the Hightowers are superior to the Targaryens, and the Hightowers deserve to be in control of Westeros. So both sides, Team Black and Team Green, have this sort of angry imperialist, violent man on both sides. So Ormond is pissed, and he says that they're going to have to come up with a different plan. We must alter our scheme. So I wonder what Ormond's backup plan is. I mean, Ormond could use Daeron and Tessarion. It seems as though maybe in the show, Daeron and Tessarion have not fought in battle yet. So maybe Ormond will come up with a plan involving Daeron's dragon Tessarion. Daeron gets excited and says, "Oh, Gwaine is coming to Tumbleton." I think Daeron looks very hopeful here. We don't know much about Daeron's relationship with Gwaine, but last season Gwaine talked about Daeron and said that Daeron is like a good guy, and he's kind and he's sweet, and he plays his lute as well as fights with his sword. And so I wonder if Gwaine is like Daeron's favorite uncle. I wonder if Gwaine is kind and good to Daeron, while Ormond is cruel. So I really hope that Daeron gets to see his uncle Gwaine and gets a good influence from Gwaine. And Ormond goes back to his pomander, hits his vape. So Rhaenyra hears that apparently they've looked into the letters and the messengers at the Red Keep, and they've found that Otto was sending letters to Ormond, but Ormond never replied to Otto's letters, which is interesting, because Otto was Hand of the King at the time. But Lord Ormond, his nephew, was not listening. Apparently Ormond has just been doing his own thing this whole time. Orwell says he's been ruling Old Town like his own kingdom. So I wonder what the connection is here with Ormond's father, Hobart. Because in season 1, Hobart was the Lord of Old Town, and we saw Hobart putting pressure on Otto. Otto is this ambitious guy who wanted Alicent's sons, his grandsons, to be king. But we saw that Hobart was kind of pushing that on Otto to some extent, which is a really interesting dynamic. And now Ormond sort of has his even grander ambitions and grander plans, which are in defiance of what Otto's plans were, because Ormond wants Daeron to be king, which is only going to happen if Aegon and Aemond die. And so, and Daeron says this episode, hey, I don't want to go against my brothers Aegon and Aemond. That would be wrong. But Ormond is yeah, no, let's do it. Let's kill my nephews. Seems to be his plan. So Ormond is pretty wild here with his plans. And I like how Rhaenyra is doing research here. I like how Rhaenyra is trying to learn about her enemy. I like how she's being thoughtful. It contrasts with, Aegon and Aemond, and even Viserys were never quite as thoughtful and strategic as Rhaenyra is trying to be. Ulf sort of comedically pokes his head in, and then he comes to talk to Rhaenyra, and he attempts to talk like a formal, proper, fancy lad. He says, "Oh, I'm honored to have sworn myself as your humble servant to petition for the favors." Ulf doesn't really know the right words to use. He's just a bloke from the pub. He's just a normal guy. And he's trying to code switch. He's trying to act like a fancy, proper, formal person. and he doesn't quite know how. And I like the sort of, that cultural or class difference that they're depicting here. And Ulf, in his long-winded way, says that he wants some favors for his friends, Clay and Muja, from the pub. So for Muja, he wants to get some land outside Rosby, which is a town near King's Landing. And for Clay, he wants forgiveness for some crimes and passage to Lys, which is a free city in the east. And so it's very funny how Ulf is trying to use his power to, like, help out his buddies, which is, corruption, I suppose, but it's also the logical thing to do. It's like the nice thing to do for your mates, given that he doesn't have much and his mates don't have much. So I guess it's corruption, but it's also like being a good friend, And I wonder to what extent Ulf's mates are exploiting Ulf, Like, was this Ulf's idea to help his friends? Or are his friends trying to use Ulf for power in the same way that they used Ulf to pay for their drinks this episode? It's interesting. And Rhaenyra's like, nah, like, we're not going to just do favors for your buddies. In fact, you're not allowed to go to the pub anymore. Because Rhaenyra says some enemy of ours could come and stab you. Because, Ulf, you are no longer just a bloke from the pub. You are a dragon rider. Ulf controls one of the biggest weapons of war in this world. He is too important to go and hang out at the pub. He must be kept safe inside the castle. So you can't go filling your belly with ale lest the Hightowers stab you in your belly. But Ulf says, it's my belly. And Rhaenyra says, it's not your belly. The crown owns your belly. Queen Rhaenyra owns Ulf's belly, owns Ulf's body. And I think that's really interesting. Like, that's really, like, in keeping with the themes of this series. In Season 1, Episode 1, Rhaenyra's mother, Emma, said that we have royal wombs, you and I. Emma's womb was owned by King Viserys and by the crown, and it was used to her death to create heirs. Rhaenyra and Alicent's wombs and bodies were owned by Viserys and the crown and by their husbands, and they were used to produce heirs. All of the soldiers in this world, the thousands of soldiers who are dying in war, their bodies are owned by the crown. And I think in a lot of ways this show is about the influence of power on the body and on the self. And like the consequence of any hierarchical world where like a person or a government or a throne owns people, and all of the different kinds of evil and exploitation and violence that result when a government owns people and owns bodies. And I think the different ways in which power owns women's bodies and owns men's bodies is really interesting. And Ulf is out here saying, well, it's my body, it's my belly. I should be able to choose what I do with my body and my belly. And Rhaenyra says no. So, Ulf thought that he was going to get more freedom and more party good times by becoming a dragon rider. But it turns out that getting more power means less freedom. Viserys, in a vision, said that the crown is a weight that crushes. And I think that power not only damages the bodies of the people around you, power damages the self. Kings and queens are consumed by power. Fire burns, fire consumes. These are all the sort of metaphorical themes that we're playing with here. But the point for Ulf is that he's not allowed to go to the pub anymore. And it's the worst news that Ulf has ever had in his life. Ulf, look at his face. Ulf has never been more sad in his life. It's like The Simpsons. You can see the actual frame where his heart breaks. Poor Ulf. The one thing he wanted in life was to go to the pub, and now he can't. So Rhaenyra is not very sympathetic to Ulf here. She sort of just like tells him off quite unsympathetically, which I think is a misplay by Rhaenyra, because obviously Ulf is one of Rhaenyra's most important allies, and I think Rhaenyra is taking Ulf for granted. And so like Ulf says in a sort of passive-aggressive way, he says that, oh, some people think that you're unkind, Rhaenyra. So he's sort of indirectly saying that he's mad at Rhaenyra for banning him from the pub. So I wonder if that discontent will have consequences. And so Rhaenyra finds out about the graffiti saying she's the queen of bastards, and so she tells the Kingsguard to tell the Gold Cloak commander Luther Largent to stop the seditious graffiti. And as I said, I think it's a mistake for Rhaenyra to just say, oh, just deal with it, just do it. Because the Goldcloaks go out and attack and brutalize a bunch of innocent commoners. And I don't think Rhaenyra wants that. I think Rhaenyra should have explained more clearly that she wants this done peacefully. She doesn't want innocent people killed. But, you know, this touched a nerve, so I think Rhaenyra is a bit too hasty and a bit too impulsive here, even though she's trying her best. So Aegon swallows his pride. King Aegon, the ex-dragon rider, the ex-king, scoops poop. And then Larys says that Rhaenyra has said that Aegon is dead. And Aegon is, like, offended. Me? Dead? So again, like, Aegon's having everything taken away from him. His identity, his pride, his dragon, his penis. He's lost it all. And he's being tested and humbled. And he's not handling it very well. When he finds out he can't get food, he confronts Janos and calls him an ape and says he'll have out his tongue. So, of course, you know, Aegon grew up a prince. Aegon became a king. He does not know what it's like to be disrespected. He does not know what it's like to miss a meal. And so he has this stupid, foolish outburst, and Janos forces him to kiss his boot. More foot stuff. More foot stuff. We meet Lord and Lady Footly. Ormond has a canny plot afoot. Aegon kisses a foot. He's with Larys Clubfoot. Larys masturbated to Alicent's feet. So much foot stuff. What's all that about? Feet and poop. A lot more of that than I expected in my dragon show. Anyway. So, Aegon is having a bad day, and Rhaenyra, on her council, eats an egg. You see that egg? Rhaenyra's eating an egg. In House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 1, Viserys ate an egg. Like father, like daughter, huh? I think in Season 1, Episode 1, the egg represented Emma's pregnancy. So, like, Emma, Viserys' wife, was pregnant. Here we are, Season 1, Episode 1. King Viserys with an egg in happier times before everything went wrong. So, yeah, I think the egg represented Emma's pregnancy in Season 1, Episode 1. And now I think the egg could represent Helena's pregnancy, which is revealed this episode. Or maybe it's just an egg. But either way, it's a nice connection between Rhaenyra and her father Viserys. So, Torrhen Manderly is now on the council as the Master of Coin. He's got a lot of bling, so maybe he knows how to handle his money. because a rich man must be fiscally responsible, right? We can trust a rich man with the government's money. And so Torrhen Manderly's like, yeah, we'll introduce some taxes. This will be great. So let's see how Torrhen Manderly does. And again, like, you know, the Manderlys are a family from the north. In the time of the main series, Wyman Manderly is a fan favorite character in the books because he's this very conniving, intelligent, ambitious politician who is also famously obese. The Manderlys enjoy their food and they also know politics. So we'll see if Torrhen Manderly is as wily. So just as they're having this political discussion, Daemon comes along and plonks a severed head on the table. And he says that it's the head of the Rider of Sheepstealer. Daemon lies to his wife and queen to try to protect Rhaena. Daemon chooses his love for Rhaena over his duty to Rhaenyra, which I think is really interesting. I mean, despite that whole arc last season where Daemon became convinced that Rhaenyra is the chosen one and must rule, I think Daemon is loyal to Rhaenyra, but he also wants to help Rhaena, so he's torn. So he plonks the severed head on the table and everyone keeps talking about money. We hear that the Team Black has asked for a loan from the Iron Bank of Braavos and they have not answered their request. I like that they mentioned the Iron Bank because, like, remember in Game of Thrones, Stannis gets a loan from the Iron Bank. Like, it's this established part of the world building that there are banks in the East that you can try and get money from, and in the books especially, the Iron Bank is really important politically. And so I like how they're acknowledging that. And Daemon talks shit with the Manderly and says, I'm the clever one around here. and it's stupid, silly, funny dick measuring. They also talk about what they should do with their gold. Mysaria says they should use gold to feed the poor, while Daemon says they should use gold to pay the gold cloaks, the city watch. So Daemon wants to pay the cops, Mysaria wants to feed the hungry, and later Rhaenyra decides she will feed the hungry. Rhaenyra has a lot of feelings about this head, because Rhaenyra wanted to get some kind of closure, some kind of justice for the death of her son Jace, and she blames Sheepstealer's rider for the death of Jace, even though I don't know if it really was Rhaena and Sheepstealer's fault that Jace died. Jace might have been killed by the Triarchy regardless. But, you know, Rhaenyra's just trying to cling to something, anything that can, like, explain and give her closure for Jace's death. So Rhaenyra says, who is this guy? Who did you kill? Like, was this guy working for the Greens? Was the Dragon Rider working for Aemond or Aegon or Ormond? How did this person claim a dragon? How does this person have Targaryen blood? What's going on? And Daemon's like, I don't know. We'll never know. A dragon is not a precise instrument. And so, you know, Rhaenyra's like, well, yeah, okay. And she tries to thank Daemon, but Daemon walks away because Daemon is so uncomfortable. Daemon is like trying to avoid eye contact with Rhaenyra, I think. Daemon feels ashamed that he's lying to his queen and his wife. And it's unfortunate because, you know, it is nice that Rhaenyra is thanking Daemon. I feel like most of the story, Daemon is doing chaotic, evil BS. And so he's constantly being chastised and being told off by the people closest to him. I think this is one of the first times that anyone has ever thanked Daemon, because Daemon is very rarely helpful. But when Rhaenyra thanks Daemon, he just stalks off because he's embarrassed and ashamed for his lying. And so it's really sad that this relationship is still so messed up. Mysaria, meanwhile, is looking delighted and smug because Rhaenyra has agreed to pay the poor, not pay the cops. And Mysaria says, whose head is that? So I think Mysaria suspects that Daemon is lying about the head. So, you know, there's this ongoing triangle of rivalry between Rhaenyra and Mysaria and Daemon. And remember that Daemon and Mysaria used to be lovers in Season 1, and Mysaria and Rhaenyra kissed in Season 2. So there is both a romantic and a political rivalry between those three. So I wonder what happens if Rhaenyra finds out that Daemon lied about Rhaena and lied about the rider of Sheepstealer. And I wonder, you know, if Daemon will have to choose between loyalty to Rhaenyra or loyalty to Rhaena. It's a complicated moral problem of love and duty. So then, Rhaenyra gives Otto's ring to Alicent. Previously, Rhaenyra killed Alicent's father, Otto, because Otto was the enemy and helped cause this war, but Rhaenyra agreed to send Otto's remains to Old Town to rest there, and Alicent now keeps her father's ring, just like how Viserys kept his wife Emma's ring as a token to remember the dead. And then Alicent sees that Helaena is pregnant. So Helaena is married to her brother Aegon. So presumably this child is fathered by Aegon. It's apparently been some months since Season 2, so I guess that there's been enough time for the pregnancy to show. I guess we could theorize that the child might be fathered by someone else, but I guess the most likely person is Aegon. I know some people theorize that Aemond and Helaena might have sex, but last time we saw them together, Helaena was a bit hostile to Aemond, so I doubt that's the case. Helaena, of course, doesn't seem to like Aegon or want to have children with him, but that appears to have happened anyway. So it's all very uncomfortable, and there's an immediate sense of dread. Because if Helaena has a child, that child is a potential claimant for the throne. Like everyone's been saying since Season 1, Rhaenyra is going to have to kill Alicent's kids and grandkids, or Alicent is going to have to kill Rhaenyra's kids and grandkids. Because as long as there is a rival branch, a rival line contending for the throne, there is potentially more civil war. So one family is going to try and wipe out the other. And so I think Alicent and Helena know this. So in the behind the scenes after this episode, Olivia Cook said that maybe they'll give Helena moon tea, which is that like abortifacient, that abortion drug. Olivia Cook even suggests that they might have to kill the baby after it's born. So some truly horrific possibilities are coming up here. And there's like, it's just bad. It's just all bad. And remember, of course, that Alicent wants to get herself and Helena and Jaehaera away and out of the city. So like maybe that's what Alicent will try to do right now, is flee. But she's currently captive of Rhaenyra. Are they going to have to keep hiding this pregnancy? It's scary stuff. Helena and her actor Fia Saban behind the scenes said that Helena feels powerless and she doesn't want to have to sacrifice another child. Helena just had her son Jaehaerys murdered in front of her. She doesn't want to lose another child. So it's all horror. In season 1, episode 1, we saw Emma die in childbirth through a violent C-section. We've seen Lena die in childbirth by dragon fire. We've seen Rhaenyra give birth twice, including once to a stillborn baby. There's been a lot of reproductive horror and tragedy in this show. And it looks like Helena might be another similarly upsetting chapter. I think when House of the Dragon Season 1 came out, someone in the press said that House of the Dragon does for childbirths what Game of Thrones did for weddings. It seems as though every wedding in Game of Thrones led to murder and horror, and it seems like every childbirth in House of the Dragon leads to horror. So gods only know what will happen next. And again, this is very different to the books. So, like, in the books, and I don't think this is a spoiler, in the books, Maelor and Aegon, in the books, Helena and Aegon have a third child named Maelor. And I think that Maelor may have existed in the show at some point, theoretically, because you know how, like, season 1's opening sequence had this, like, bloodline graphic, and it showed a like family tree, a sort of metaphorical family tree. So like in House of the Dragon season 1 episode 9, you could see this circle representing Jaehaerys, this circle representing Jaehaera, and this circle representing Maelor. The season 1 opening sequence suggested that Aegon and Helena's third child Maelor did exist. But it seems like they changed their mind and they changed their plan, because in House of the Dragon Season 2, Maelor did not exist and has never been mentioned. But now Helena is pregnant again. So maybe this is some version of the Maelor plot. And this is something that has angered the author George R.R. Martin. In 2024, George Martin wrote a blog post where he criticized the changes that House of the Dragon was making from his books. And George specifically complained about the changes to Helena and her children. So this is a major divergence, and it means that I don't know what's going to happen next, because it's quite different to the books. So I wonder where this is going, and I wonder if the author George Martin is fuming. They did have a butterfly in Helena's book in an earlier episode this season, and George Martin's critical blog post talked about toxic butterflies, and Helena's book had a literal toxic butterfly in it. So the showrunners are definitely very aware of George Martin's criticism. Back in Tumbleton, we have a fairly ugly day for night scene. Like, you can see the daylight shining off these soldiers' armors, but they've digitally changed the night to look like day. And I suppose the reason they've done that is that the soldiers are enforcing a curfew, where they're saying, observe the curfew, all indoors. Maybe they added that by ADR. Little bit clunky. But the dragon Vermithor flies overhead because Hugh has arrived. And there's Cat. So maybe Cat realizes, oh, that is my husband on his dragon, come to save me. How romantic, how heroic. So I wonder if Hugh will succeed in saving Cat, but I wonder what political implications that might have. The plan at the moment seems to be for Hugh to just stay and watch. But, like, what happens if Tessarion flies out? What happens if an army marches out? What is Hugh meant to do then? In Season 3, Episode 1, Hugh and Ulf and Adam were near Harrenhal, and they didn't know what they were meant to do when Aemond didn't turn up. There was a problem where Rhaenyra's orders weren't clear enough, or Hugh and Adam and Ulf were confused. I feel like they probably should have learned from that, and maybe, you know, Ulf and Hugh and Adam should have asked for more specific orders here, because what is the plan, exactly? What is the plan? What is Hugh meant to do if things go awry at Tumbleton? So the Goldcloaks crack down on the graffiti in King's Landing, and they seem to attack a bunch of innocent people, and Luther Largent kills some common man who says that he's innocent. So I don't think Rhaenyra would approve of this, but this is what the Goldcloaks do about the treasonous graffiti, and I worry that it might just turn the people against Rhaenyra more. Then we're back at Tumbleton with Lord Ormond Hightower and Prince Daeron Targaryen, and we see Daeron sort of nuzzling his dragon Tessarion. So Daeron loves his dragon, which is beautiful to see, but Ormond doesn't like the dragon and says it's just a beast. Ormond wants to use dragon power, but he still sees dragons as like dirty and evil and profane magic. And so this symbol of the dragon being chained, I think represents Daeron. Daeron is a chained dragon, in that Daeron is controlled and abused by Ormond. So Ormond says that he has raised Daeron to be a good Hightower, to believe in the religion of the Faith of the Seven. But Ormond says that there is a taint in Daeron's blood. Ormond says that the Targaryens are a savage, cunning, inferior race. He says that the Targaryens created dragons with dark spells, and that it's wrong that they are in charge, because the Hightowers are superior and they should rule. So that is fascinating. None of that is in the books. But Ormond says that Daeron should be king. So like, you know, I mean, it's interesting for a lot of reasons. I think that it makes sense that the Hightowers are proud and they have a different ideology to the Targaryens, and they hate the Targaryens, because the Hightowers would be one of the most powerful families. Maybe the Hightowers would be the most powerful family if it weren't for the Targaryens and their dragons. And, you know, there are many great houses in Westeros in this time who are angry that the Targaryens are in charge. I mean, even in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, we saw, like, the Fossaways were complaining about the Targaryens. Lionel Baratheon was complaining about the Targaryens, saying that they're tyrants and outsiders who wrongfully took over Westeros. And so I think it makes sense that, you know, the Hightowers would rather get rid of the Targaryens. And it's so interesting that there's this ideological element, this religious element, this idea of blood superiority, all these like horrific ideological ideas. And it's so interesting that Ormond is using Daeron Targaryen and his dragon, and he wants to use them against the Targaryens and their dragons. And he's telling Daeron that there's something bad in his blood, which is such a messed up thing to tell somebody. So it's fascinating, and I think that Ormond is ultimately using Daeron for his own power and ambition and control, and the actor said as much in the behind the scenes feature. But yeah, it's really interesting to see. And again, like, we have this idea that the Targaryens not only ride dragons and control dragons, but that the Targaryens created dragons. And this is an idea that's like not really directly stated in the books. But it's an idea that is theorized about a lot in the fan community. And so, like, at the very start of each episode, we've seen this image in the opening sequence tapestry of a dragon with fiery wings and a human head bleeding while someone's kneeling and there's like a dagger. So it looks like a human sacrifice is taking place, a blood sacrifice that is like connecting humans and dragons. So I think the theory is that this image represents the magic ritual that bound the dragons to the Valyrians. There's all sorts of obscure theories here, but like There's a lot of mythology in the books about like a man sacrificing a woman to gain fire power. And some of that imagery is like even evoked by Darren stabbing Leo in this episode. This imagery of like Darren stabbing Leo in the chest is quite similar to some of the imagery we see of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa. It also looks like, I mean, spoilers for Game of Thrones Season 8, but it also looks like when Jon Snow stabs Daenerys, right? Like, that was very much an Azor Ahai, Nissa Nissa type situation, and it's a hell of a thing to see. And this is something that comes up, a lot in the mythology. There's all these mythological figures who sacrifice women and gain fire power, and it may have been what created the dragons, is one of the theories in the books. So it's all very interesting. But the point here is that Ormond is trying to use Darren to get power, and Ormond makes Darren kill Leo. And Darren doesn't want to kill this man. All Leo did was try and defend his sister Kat, but Ormond forces him. And I think this is a way of controlling Darren. It's almost like a hazing thing, making him culpable, making him brutal like Ormond. And so he does it, and it's really tragic. And I wonder if this is the first person who Darren has ever killed. So it's a very dark scene, and Tessarion burns Leo, and Ormond says, "Let us begin." It's a wonderful introduction to Ormond as a villain, showing his ideology, showing his ambition to put Darren on the throne, and showing his ideology of Hightower superiority. And I wonder if Darren will be able to escape his control. I wonder if Darren will be able to escape the chains that bind him to Ormond. I wonder if he will get to fly free. So, what else is going on? Let's talk about some of your questions in the live chat. If you want to ask a question, the best way is using the Streamlabs link in the video description. As I said, our live stream next week will be later than usual. Our Season 3, Episode 5 live stream will be on Monday, not on Sunday night. And this is because we're traveling to cover the new Mad King play. This is a play from the Royal Shakespeare Company. It's an official play with input from George Martin, set about 17 years before Game of Thrones. And I'm excited about it because I think it might reveal some of the oldest mysteries in the Game of Thrones books, involving Rhaegar and Lyanna, and Brandon and Ashara, and some of the most mysterious characters in the series. So we're going to make some first impressions, conversations, videos chatting about this play in a couple of weeks. And if you want to see it first, you can sign up on Nebula at the link below. It's a good way to support this channel. You can also listen to Dragon Time, which is a series of lengthy, fun chats with Alt Shift X and Glidus about every episode of House of the Dragon. If you sign up with my link in the video description, you can get 50% off an annual subscription. So if you check it out, thank you very much. But thank you to everyone who's listening. And we will do a quick spoiler zone later towards the end of this live stream. But for now, let's respond to some of your thoughts and some of your questions. So, thank you to Dr. Puffington, who says, if George R.R. Martin finishes the books, would you want them to remake the show? Yeah, I mean, I would love to see the books completed, and I would love to see a screen adaptation of a complete series. It would be a big undertaking to try and remake the whole show with a different ending. I have heard people say that an animated adaptation of the books would be interesting, so I think that could be cool. So, yeah, maybe the animated show is a good idea. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of like remakes of stuff these days that doesn't need remakes sometimes. But look, most of all, I just want the books, man. I would prefer getting Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring over any other show or adaptation. But of course, if the books do happen, then yeah, like a full adaptation would be awesome as well. Thank you, Sora Not Roxas, who says, oh my god, Maester theory confirmed. So there are theories that the Maesters have political influence more than they should. A character in the books says that the Maesters killed off the dragons, and so something that they could have done more of in this show was to explore that idea. In season 1, we saw Grand Maester Melos conspiring with Otto Hightower. And so there were theories that maybe the Maesters are trying to get the dragons killed. The Maesters are trying to kill off the Targaryens. And that might make sense because the Maesters are, science and the mundane and rationality and stability and bureaucracy. And they might oppose magic and fire and dragons and tyranny. I think that there are lots of reasons to think that the Maesters might not like the dragons and Targaryens, but we've never really seen a lot of that kind of conspiring happen in show or books. So it's mysterious. I think that Orwyle is genuinely trying to help Rhaenyra, and I think Orwyle's telling the truth when he says that the Hightowers and the Faith don't control each other, and like the Maesters of the Citadel are part of that. I mean, I think that Grand Maester Pycelle in the time of Game of Thrones is definitely corrupt. Pycelle betrayed Aerys. Pycelle betrayed Jon Arryn. Grand Maester Pycelle was certainly a treacherous conspirator who was more loyal to Tywin Lannister than to anyone else. But, is there some grand unified Maester conspiracy where all the Maesters are working together over hundreds of years to destroy the Targaryens? I don't think we've seen evidence of that, but it's certainly a theory, and it's an idea that the books do play with occasionally. Thank you for the donation from Ryan, who says, will you make a lore video on the Mad King play? Yeah, well, we'll definitely do like a first impressions chat conversation podcast in a couple of weeks after the play comes out. So if you want to hear that, it'll be on Nebula first. Link to Nebula in the description. And I think, I haven't seen the play, so I don't know what it'll be like. I hope it'll be really fascinating. If I do feel like it's worth talking about, I will make a video about it. It will be really interesting to cover, what we know in the books and how that differs from what we see in the play, and what the most interesting revelations or new information is in the play, because it seems like George Martin approves of this and is interested in this. So I'm really hopeful that this might be our first new information, our first proper revelation of the mysteries of this time period ever. And I mean, Game of Thrones, the TV show, revealed some stuff about Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, but I want to hear it from George. The Game of Thrones TV show went so far off the books that it did not feel like a satisfying conclusion to the books. I'm interested in what this play will reveal in the book lore. Thanks for the donation from Sir Kermit, who says, I got my sibling to read the main series and they fell in love. I'm trying to get them to read Dunk and Egg. So my question is, better to watch the show than read, or read then watch A Night of the Seven Kingdoms? I feel like, personally, it's better to read the original source material before you watch the show. You could just watch the show and not read the book. That would also be fine. I think that the show contains most of what's in the book. With Game of Thrones, the main Game of Thrones books have so much more going on than what's in the TV show. I feel like the books have much richer characters and plots and subplots and mysteries and texture and detail and life in them. The books are so much more than the Game of Thrones show. But with Dunk and Egg, those books are very, very short. They're just novellas, 30,000 words long. You can read those books in one sitting. They're very short. So the TV show is kind of more than the books in the case of Dunk and Egg, I feel. So, if you... I would suggest that you just start reading the books, and because they're pretty short. So if you're into it, you can just read them. And if you're not into the books, then just watch the show. That's what I'd suggest with Dunk and Egg. Thank you, Anne, who says, I think Ulf's remark when he's being knighted is an inside joke making fun of the fact that we still don't know what the full oath sounds like. Yeah, that's a good point. So in the previous episode, Rhaenyra says some of the vows of a knight. She says, "In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to protect the innocent. In the name of the maiden, I order you to protect all women." Or in the name of the... Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head. But there's 7 gods. And so you would think that there are 7 vows for each of the 7 gods. But in all the books and all the shows, we've only ever heard 3 or 4 oaths. We heard some of the oaths in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and we saw 3 of the oaths in last episode. But a lot of us are like, hey, what are all the other oaths? And we've never heard them. So when Ulf last episode says, "Is that it?" You're right. I think that might be like a meta joke, saying, "Is that all the oaths? Aren't there more oaths?" Thank you, Daniel, who says, "Gwaine is surprised that King's Landing has fallen, but he knows that Ormond took Tumbleton, which is both further south and in response to the taking." Yeah, well, Gwaine met Alice, and Alice said that King's Landing fell, and then after that, Gwaine says that Ormond took Tumbleton. So Gwaine must have learned about Tumbleton after he learned about King's Landing. I guess the question is, how did Gwaine find out about Tumbleton? Maybe Alice said so off-screen? Maybe they received a message off-screen? Yeah, I don't know. Thank you, Big Bopper, who says, "Will you ever collaborate with that scoundrel Alt Swift X?" I actually refuse to be in the same room as Alt Swift X. That's how much I disapprove of Alt Swift X. Alt Swift X is too silly. Alt Swift X goes off topic and rambles and makes jokes that are unbecoming of a YouTuber, I think. So I would never condone that kind of frivolous behavior from my disreputable half-grunkle Alt Swift X. Thank you, Grand Pop, who says, "Hi, Shifty Cent. Love your work. Glad to see Rhaenyra found her dad's Lego set this week. What stone-cut model of a Song of Ice and Fire location would you have in your bedchambers if you could?" Ooh. I feel like one of the most underappreciated locations in Westeros is Moat Cailin. Moat Cailin is in the Neck. It's like between the North and the Riverlands. And Moat Cailin was one of the biggest, grandest castles in Westeros, but it's all like sunken and ancient, and some of the towers are starting to fall. I guess it's like similar to Harrenhal in some ways, but it's just monstrously large and really cool and strange and mysterious. And it's said that the Children of the Forest did a magic spell and brought down the Hammers of the Waters that flooded the Neck from Moat Cailin. So I suppose it was that flood, that magical sorceress flood, that caused Moat Cailin to be all wonky and muddy and the towers to start falling down. So Moat Cailin is very cool, and like no one is really in charge of Moat Cailin properly at the time of the main series. Like the Ironborn take over Moat Cailin, but like the Crannogmen are attacking them, and it's this big old mess. So, you know, I suppose Moat Cailin would not make a very neat or tidy looking Lego set because it's in ruins and it's in a marsh, but I think it's a pretty neat place. Thank you, Kennard, who says, "Might Helena be pregnant from Daemon when he had sex with Alice Rivers at Harrenhal without even knowing? Maybe Alice connected them through her magic." Now that, Kennard, is a wild theory. So last season, Daemon, yeah, he had these visions that Alice Rivers seemed to be causing Daemon to have. And then Daemon magically saw Helena, and Helena spoke to Daemon. And I suppose Kennard is suggesting that Daemon somehow impregnated Helena by having sex with Alice, which we didn't see happening. But maybe that theoretically happened off screen, and maybe Daemon did or did not know that was happening. But maybe Daemon somehow magically impregnated Helena? Is that what we're saying? As though this story needed any more incest. My goodness. That's wild stuff. But look, that's not the craziest theory that I've seen this week. I mean, one of the most infamous theories in the fandom is the time-traveling Tyrion fetus theory, which I don't have the time or sanity to get into, but my goodness. I think Glidus has a theory about... I can't remember the term, but there's some truly fascinating gynecological theorems going on with I think that Glidus theorized that Tyrion is the son of both Tywin Lannister and Aerys Targaryen. It's something about a chimeric something. I don't know. Look it up, or don't if you want to keep your sanity. Thank you, Rocky, who says that Kristen is Darren's father. Yeah, I mean, Alicent and Kristen were having sex for a while. In behind the scenes, they said that Alicent and Kristen only started having sex after Viserys died. And Darren, like, according to the timeline, Darren should be born before Viserys died. So the timeline probably doesn't fit. But, like, we don't know for sure in the show when Alicent and Kristen might have had sex. Maybe they had sex once earlier. So I guess it's theoretically possible that Kristen might be Darren's father. That would be funny. That would be wild because, of course, you know, so much of the opposition to Rhaenyra comes from the fact that she has bastards, and her heirs are the bastards of Harwin Strong, the dark-haired bastards of a Strong. And so if one of Alicent's children is also a dark-haired bastard, it would be very funny and ironic. Thank you, Colt Foster, who says, thought it was really neat that they showed how even Daemon, the single most experienced dragon rider, is still powerless to control his dragon at times. I wonder if it makes him reconsider how we viewed Viserys. Yeah, I mean, this vindicates Viserys, right? Like, Viserys always said dragons can't really be controlled, and it seems like he's right. Vhagar's disobedient, Sheepstealer's disobedient, now Caraxes is disobedient. And so Daemon's whole notion of, like, building an empire on dragon power seems like a really bad idea, doesn't it? If you build a whole empire and a government on this uncontrollable power that constantly gets innocent people killed. Thank you, Raymond, who says, is Aegon II the biggest underdog in A Song of Ice and Fire history? His mother, brother, entire family, and a dozen dragons and half of Westeros are all against him. Yeah, well, Aegon has not done a very good job as a politician, and indeed no one really taught him how to be a politician. So he's really up shit creek without a paddle, and I do wonder how he can possibly make this work. It's fun and interesting because he's a loathsome character, but he's also a very charismatic performance by Tom Glencarny, and his character does evil things, and he also has a very charming performance by the actor. And so yeah, he's fun to watch. He's fun to watch, and things do not look good right now. He's gone from sitting on the throne to scooping poop in like 4 episodes, which is like a speedrun if ever I've seen one. So let's see if he can turn it around. Thank you, Daniel, who says, Ormond reminds me of a more serious Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think he has a similar look and mannerisms, like standing up naked out of the bath, his smug arrogance and rage and sensitivity to odors. Yeah, you're right. I mean, when Dennis in Sunny screams, I am a golden god, there's definitely a bit of that when Ormond screams and has his tantrums. Yeah, my goodness. I wonder, I mean, Ormond is basically using the Dennis system on Darren, isn't he? My goodness, what a horrifying character. Thank you, Tony, who says that Ormond's racial superiority rant is even more hilarious when you remember that canonically the Hightowers look almost identical to the Valyrians. Yeah, so the Hightowers have a very, very old and ancient and mysterious history, and it is funny and interesting that the Hightower itself is built on a foundation of stone that was made with dragonfire, pre-Valyrian dragonfire, which hints that there may have been pre-Valyrian dragon riders in Old Town and at the High Tower. And like there's also the Danes live nearby who also have Valyrian features, and like Starfall, a star fell there and they forged the sword Dawn from it, and there's Battle Isle next to the High Tower. And my point is that a lot of like ancient magical stuff happened in and around the High Tower. And it's true that Lynesse Hightower looked like Daenerys, and Allery Hightower has silver hair, even though she's not old. And Alicent Hightower in the books, possibly maybe, may have been blonde or having silvery hair because Jaehaerys mistook Alicent for his daughter. So, look, I wouldn't say that it is canon that the Hightowers look like Valyrians. In my opinion, it's ambiguous. And in all of the official art, Alicent Hightower has dark hair. So it's all ambiguous, but yes, I do think that there are hints that the Hightowers might possibly descend from dragon riders, like a different ancient branch of dragon riders. So it's very, very funny that Ormond is out here saying that, oh, dragon riders are evil and tainted, and Ormond might have a little bit of dragon blood in him. Maybe. Thank you, Jace, who says, enjoyed the episode. Nice to see them call back to lots of small details. Would you mind giving us a brief update as to where all the forces are on the map? Yeah, sure. So, I guess there is the Hightower army, tens of thousands of men, at Tumbleton, which is around here. Oh, it's around here, actually, which is near King's Landing. And then there's an army of Riverlords led by Oscar Tully, and that is in the Riverlands somewhere. They just fought against the Lannister army and defeated the Lannisters near the Westerlands, and now they're marching towards King's Landing. But at Harrenhal, there is Criston Cole and Gwaine with a big army of Crownlanders. A small army of Crownlanders. And so Criston and the Crownlanders are going to try and fight the much larger army of Riverlords. And yeah, meanwhile, there's the Hightowers at Tumbleton. And I suppose Jane Arryn at the Vale, she has an army that she has not sent out anywhere. And Lord Boros Baratheon has armies of Stormlanders that he has not sent anywhere yet. A lot of the Reach Lords were defeated and taken over by the Hightowers. The Tyrells themselves are not doing much because the current Lord of Highgarden is a baby. And his mother is ruling in her stead. The Westermen are mostly exhausted. The Greyjoys are not really mentioned at this point in the show. I hope that they will be mentioned because they do things in the books. There is also the Northmen, led by Roddy Dustin, and so they've joined with the Riverlord army. So, yeah, there's the Riverlords with the Northmen, there's the Hightowers, and there's the Crownlanders. And there's also 7 dragons, which could probably easily kill most of these armies. Thank you to Raven number 69, who says, hey, Helena's pregnancy reveal made me so uneasy. I think they're probably going to go with Aemond being the father, which is horrifying. But what if we get lucky and it's some old god's magic baby? Yeah, I think, like, there does not appear to be anybody who Helena wants to have sex with. And so we don't want to have to imagine Helena getting into a situation she doesn't want to be in. And so maybe it's like more pleasant to imagine some kind of immaculate conception. Yeah, well, look, I think it's probably Aegon that's the father, but we'll just have to wait and see. And I hope that there's some kind of resolution here that isn't overly horrifying for Helena. Thank you, Hammer, who says, sup, shift. My girlfriend desperately wants to start calling fake Daeron Faeron, if you'd ever be so inclined. I don't expect to see Faeron again. Yeah, I wonder what happens to Faeron after Rhaenyra figures out that he's not the real Daeron. I don't know. I hope that he goes free. I hope he gets to see his mother again. But I suppose his mother is in Tumbleton and might be killed by Ormond, right? So not only is Hugh's wife Cat in Tumbleton, but also Faeron's mother is in Tumbleton. So, you know, along with the thousands of others, there are many hostages that we care about in Tumbleton. Thank you, Poochie, who says, is Maelor evidence that Jaehaera is illegitimate? Don't see what you mean, Poochie. I mean, I think that we're meant to... yeah, okay, well, if we speculate that Helena's pregnancy is not from Aegon, like, if we imagine that this child was Aemond's child, then maybe we could argue that the other children, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, are also not Aegon's children, but are Aemond's children. I feel like if Aemond was the father, we would have been shown intimacy between Aemond and Helena by now. So I don't think that's where they're going, but I guess you can speculate it. Thank you, Royce, who says, Rhaenyra is a pretty awful queen, right? She's proving there's no value in siding with her. Yeah, I mean, I think Rhaenyra is making some mistakes. Like the crackdown on, the common people by the Gold Cloaks this episode is unfortunate. But I think Rhaenyra is trying to do the right thing. And I think she's definitely causing less damage than Aegon and Aemond did. I mean, Aegon murdered 100 innocent rat catchers. Aemond burned thousands of innocent people at sharp point. Rhaenyra is not a mass murderer like they are. And she is trying to think carefully about issues like, how do we use our money? Do we fund the Gold Cloaks or fund the poor? I think Rhaenyra has good intentions. I mean, I think that Rhaenyra's worst decision politically was that she had 3 bastard children with Harwin. And that, in many ways, caused this war. Rhaenyra shares part of the blame for causing this war. But I think that, as a queen now, Rhaenyra is trying her best to do the right thing by the people. But, this is the moment of testing, isn't it? I think that Rhaenyra could be doing a better job with, Hugh and Ulf, because I think that they are 2 of the most powerful people in the world, and she should be doing more to keep them loyal. I think that it's also unfortunate what happened with Corlys. I think, it makes sense that Rhaenyra doesn't want to legitimize Adam and Alan. But I think that Rhaenyra maybe should have done more to keep Corlys on side. If she said, I promise that I will legitimize Alan and Adam when the war is over. If she did that, that might be a good idea. So I think that, Rhaenyra is making mistakes, but I think that she has good intentions, and I think she's doing a better job than Aegon and Aemond did. Thank you, Wiggly, who says, I think they squandered Ormond's character. Killing Cat's brother made him too one-dimensionally evil. It would have been more interesting if he was a truly just man who just truly believed in the Greens' cause. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of evil characters in this show. And I think it can be sometimes really interesting to have a character who is more well-intentioned or more moral. And yeah, and Ormond is not that. I think the characters who are that are Alicent and Otto. Alicent and Otto are both characters who do want a stable, peaceful realm, and they do want prosperity, and they do try really hard to rule well. And I think ultimately Otto and Alicent failed in many ways, but I think that they are some of the more morally acceptable characters. Of course, Otto was willing to murder Rhaenyra, and Alicent tried to cut the eyeball out of a child's face, so it's probably too much to say that they're good people. I think Rhaenyra is the closest we've got to a heroic character, or a character who's trying to be heroic, who actually has power. I mean, I guess that, Alan and Adam are also relatively decent people, but they don't wield much power. Mysaria is trying to make positive change. We'll see if she manages to be successful. But yeah, Ormond is not a good person, I don't think. Thank you, old McDirtfinger, who says, you lost a Westworld reference? Thank you, Free My Girl Tessarian, who says, my theory, based purely on the anti-Targaryen eugenics speech, is that Ormond has dyed Daeron's hair as a rejection of his Targ blood. I also think his disdain for Tessarion is because he knows if Daeron became king with a dragon, he wouldn't be a good puppet king. Yeah, I think that, Ormond is trying to suppress the Targaryen-ness in Daeron. Ormond says that Daeron is a good Hightower. He worships the faith, and he should, reject the Targaryenism that is within him. And I agree that I think that Daeron probably is, naturally Targaryen blonde, not dark-haired. Because otherwise, why did the fake Daeron have blonde hair? So, yeah, it's interesting how we're, in multiple ways, symbolically, with the hair, with the dragon, with the religion, Ormond is trying to, forcibly alter Daeron's identity, which is so messed up in so many ways. And I wonder if there'll be a moment when Daeron rejects that. It reminds me of, Baelor. Corlys said, hey, Baelor, maybe you should rule Driftmark. And Baelor said, no, I am not Salton Sea. I am not Valarian. I am fire and blood. I am Targaryen. And it's cool to see Baela define her own identity, and I wonder if Darren will get to define his own identity. I think that the construction of identity is one of the most important themes in like all of George Martin's stories. And so choosing your name is so important. Thank you, Oliver, who says, where is Adam? So in the last episode, Rhaenyra ordered Adam and Baela to go and fly around on their dragons and look for Vhagar and look for Sheep Stealer. Oliver says, will Corlys die on this voyage? I don't think Corlys is going on a voyage because he's going to fight the Triarchy who are running amok in the Crown Lands around King's Landing. So I don't think Corlys needs to get on a boat. It does seem as though every time Corlys gets on a boat, he gets badly wounded and falls into the sea immediately afterwards, so perhaps he'll be safer on a horse. Thank you, Jess, who says, I love that they're drawing parallels between Rhaenyra and the sibling she knows the least, Daeron. I kind of love that Daeron is the most like Viserys, despite not being raised by him at all, unlike his siblings. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think Aegon and Aemond were raised by Viserys at all either. But yeah, I mean, Daeron and Rhaenyra both seem to be relatively good-hearted people who want mercy. And so I imagine that, yeah, maybe Rhaenyra and Daeron would get along. I mean, that's one of the funny things, is that in this entire show, Rhaenyra has never had a conversation with any of her siblings, with Aegon, or Aemond, or Daeron. Well, she has talked with Helaena, but none of her brothers, half-brothers. And so it's one of the great ironies that this war is being fought within a family, but among strangers. And you wonder if Rhaenyra got to actually like speak and get to know her brothers, maybe she would be able to end this war. It's one of the unfortunate things that this is all based on misunderstanding, or at least not knowing each other very well. Brinks says, is House Manderley a northern house yet? Yeah, so originally the Manderleys came from the Mander River, which is the same river that the Hightower army has been marching up for the past season. And so House Manderley was originally from the Reach, and after a political kerfuffle in the Reach, the Manderleys fled, and the Manderleys moved to the north, and the Starks decided to let the Manderleys stay in the north. And so it was this act of sort of kindness and generosity that the Manderleys are still loyal and grateful to the Starks centuries and centuries and centuries later. So yeah, that was a long time ago. The Manderleys are a northern house. And they do have those like ancient roots in the Reach. And so as a result of their origins, the Manderleys still have a different culture to the other Northmen. The Manderleys practice knighthood, which is a practice that doesn't exist as much in the rest of the North. And White Harbour, the Manderley city, is one of the larger, more populous cities in the North, whereas most of the North doesn't have big cities. So there's lots of these like cultural differences, which is really interesting, giving the Manderleys a unique identity. Thank you, Diamond Dog, who says, I know this isn't how it plays out in the books, but maybe Rhaenyra could have used Ulf's tavern connections to get closer to the people. Yeah, that's a great idea, DD. Because, yeah, Ulf knows people. Ulf is popular. Maybe Ulf could be a good spokesperson for Rhaenyra. Maybe Ulf could help convince the people that Rhaenyra is a good queen. That's a great idea. And so, yeah, it is so unfortunate that Rhaenyra alienates Ulf and doesn't use all of those connections. I mean, that sort of happened in Season 2. In Season 2, Rhaenyra got Mysaria to get Sylvie and Alinda to talk about how the Greens were exploiting the people and failing to feed the people. And Ulf was there in the room, and Ulf was complaining about the Greens. And I don't think that Ulf knew that he was participating in like an information warfare campaign, but he was. And like Ulf was out there saying, we want meat. Why do the dragons get sheep, but we don't? Like Ulf was being influential on the streets of King's Landing before he even knew that he was doing that. So yeah, Ulf could be useful, but Rhaenyra's not using him that way. Thank you, Old McDirtfinger, who says, Ormond stepping out of the bathtub, including the butt shot, is similar to Daenerys in Game of Thrones stepping out of the bath in front of Daario. Yeah, that's true. Daenerys does a very similar thing in like Game of Thrones season 3 or 4 or 2 or something. 3 or 4. Thank you, Pluvio, who says, if we pretend that Aegon is Fagon, is a pretend Daeron dare wrong? Uh, that takes some unpacking, doesn't it? Look, there's a character in the books called Young Griff, and in the books, Young Griff is supposedly actually Aegon Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar and Elia, who was believed to be dead, but supposedly Varys and Illyrio secretly saved Aegon and now want to put him on the throne, except there's fan theories that Aegon is not Aegon and he's actually a Blackfire, so people in the community call him Fagon. That's the short version. If you want to know more about that, watch our video about Varys. So yeah, if Aegon is Fagon, maybe Daeron is Daerong. Sure. Thank you, Danny, who says, I'm not a fan of the speculation that Daeron is Kristen Cole's bastard son with Alicent. Makes no sense, given that in the show, Valyrian blood is needed to bond with a dragon, unlike the novels. I think that it's an ambiguous situation in both the books and the novels. Like, in the novels, some characters say that only Targaryens can ride dragons. But there are characters in the books, like Nettles, who rides a dragon, and no one knows who her parents are. And it's possible that she doesn't have Targaryen blood. It's possible that she does, it's possible that she doesn't. But I think that Nettles is in the story partly to make us question the idea that you need Targaryen blood. And Adam, in the show, is similar, because Adam is the son of Corlys, who has no Targaryen blood, and a woman who we don't know if she has Targaryen blood. Corlys says in the show that, well, I don't know what your mother's heritage is, and so maybe she has Targaryen blood, maybe she doesn't. I think that we're meant to believe in the books and the show that it's possible that you don't need Targaryen blood. And that's something that they said in season 2 of the show when Jace was like, well, maybe you don't need to be a dragon lord to ride a dragon. I think it's meant to be ambiguous because, like, I mean, what's the story we're trying to tell here? What's the meaning here? What do you think George Martin is trying to say? Do you think George Martin is trying to say that some people are inherently superior because of the DNA in their blood, and some people are better and more important and more powerful than others? I think the message that George Martin is saying is that that's bullshit. The whole idea of, like, feudalism and superiority and divine right is a destructive and unjust idea, and that's part of the point of these stories. So I think that it makes sense if the story is that, like, yeah, some people claim to be superior, but really it's more about the choices that you make, and it's more about what's in your heart than what's in your genes. I think that's probably the story that these stories are trying to tell. But, you know, we've never gotten an ending to any of these series. We've never gotten an ending to the main Game of Thrones book series. We've never gotten an ending to the Dunk and Egg books. Fire and Blood is itself part 1 of a 2-part unfinished series. And yes, we got Game of Thrones season 8, but I think some folks would rather forget it. So it's funny because, you know, we've been sitting here analyzing a book series for a decade to which we still have no true ending. I don't know. Somehow that's part of why I'm keen to see this Harrenhal play. Juby says that Ulf is no longer able to go to taverns. Yeah, that's going to be pretty upsetting for him. Thank you, Tao Zun, who says, you don't show a fully intact dragon and bicker about it being dead, then cut to a headless, rotting corpse next scene if the first dragon isn't alive. Tao Zun, I think you're on the money. Tao Zun's killing it, because they argue this episode about whether Sunfire is alive. Sunfire and Meleys were attacked and downed at the same time. Same time, same day, at the Battle of Rook's Rest, Season 2, Episode 4. But Sunfire is in one piece. Like, they did say that Sunfire is rotting, and we do see flies around Sunfire, but Sunfire's looking in pretty good nick. Like, Sunfire's in one piece. I don't see any, like, rot or holes in Sunfire here. But if we look at Meleys, who was, like, downed and killed on the same day, Meleys has a whole lot of holes. It's really visibly rotting and falling apart. I mean, I guess that's partly because the Greens cut off Meleys' head and carted it through King's Landing. But yeah, you're right. Like, you would think that Melis and Sunfire would be like similar levels of rot and decomposition, but they're not. So maybe that suggests that Sunfire might be in a better state. Thank you, Connor, who says, I thought it was a funny coincidence that when Ultrift X and Glidus brought up Halfjaw, who is a shipmaster in Halo 2, when talking about Corlys, Corlys is also a shipmaster. So, yeah, on Dragon Time, the show with Ultrift X and Glidus, Ultrift X and Glidus have inexplicably been bringing up Halo 2 a lot. You wouldn't think that there's a lot of connection between House of the Dragon and the Xbox video game Halo 2, but yeah, Glidus and Shrift have been talking about Halo 2 a bit. The Dragon Time conversations are like 5 hours long, and they come out each week right after House of the Dragon airs. And they go down some silly rabbit holes, and you might enjoy them. And you can watch Dragon Time Season 3, Episode 4 now at Nebula, at the link below, and it's a good way to support this channel. But yeah, you're right. Because Halfjaw is one of Sharako's pirates in Season 3, Episode 1. And Halfjaw is also the name of an alien in Halo 2. And both Halfjaws are shipmasters of sorts. And Corlys is a shipmaster, so that is kind of amusing. Hi, Sir Bingle, who says, what do you think of Ormond's canty scheme? What do you think Ormond's canny scheme is? Yeah, so I think that Ormond's original plan was to get Vhagar's help and then to lure Rhaenyra's dragons and to kill Rhaenyra's dragons with Vhagar. Like, I think that that's kind of the only way the Greens can win right now. I think also if they use Helena's dragon Dreamfire, that would help, but they're not doing that. So I think that was probably Ormond's plan. Now Ormond has to think of another plan, and I guess he's trying to use the people of Tumbleton as a hostage against Rhaenyra. Maybe Ormond can try and turn the people against Rhaenyra in King's Landing. I think those are some of the plans that they might try to attempt. And Bingle says more evidence for Azor Ahai being the first dragon rider. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking. Because, like, we see Darren killing Leo, and just the symbolism and the imagery of this, like, Dragon Lord boy killing this kneeling figure with a Valyrian sword as a sacrifice. I mean, it really, like, brings up the legend of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa, where Azor Ahai stabbed his wife in the chest to create the sword Lightbringer, the fiery sword, which may be a metaphor for dragons. There's lots of different theories, but, like, my opinion and the theory that I like is that the story of Azor Ahai is the story of the creation of dragons, or the creation of human control over dragons. And I think that this was a sin. I think this was an atrocity. I think this was something terrible that was done. This was stealing fire from the gods like Prometheus. I think this was in some way a crime against the old gods. I think that Nissa Nissa may have been a child of the forest. I think that Azor Ahai was stealing, like, skin-changing magic from the old gods and using it to control dragons. And this all happened thousands of years ago, and it's how the Valyrians got their power, and I think that it also caused the White Walkers to exist. This is all just wild speculation, and this is something that lots of people in the community have had theories and arguments about for decades. But I think that's kind of what's going on, and I think that those ideas are evoked by this imagery of Darren killing Leo, and also Ormond talking about, you know, the Targaryens using dark spells to create abominations, create dragons. It's all very interesting, and I'm very happy that the show is playing with some of those obscure ideas from the books and from the lore, the deep lore, the fandom. Thank you for the donation from Nutella Happens, who says, that's just where the story is at, I guess, is how I feel about Hot D writing since season 1. Yeah, look, I mean, this show is going further from the books, and that is, like, disorienting for those of us who read the books. I think sometimes the changes that they make are great and make sense. Like, I really liked the Daemon Rhaena scene this episode. And I'm intrigued by all of the Sunfire stuff. But it is very different from the books. And there are some aspects that I'm not sure if they make as much sense. Like, I don't know, just like the Rhaenyra-Alicent relationship is something that I'm not as convinced by. But, hey, everyone's got their own opinions. Thank you, Daniel, who says, I feel like I need the opening from Game of Thrones to help place everybody and the pieces. I'd like to see the opening, like a campaign map, with pieces for each person, and a moving sea of green and black. Yeah, it's tricky because sometimes this show happens, like, entirely in the Red Keep, in one place, but this episode takes place over, like, 4 or more cities, 4 or more distant locations. I mean, they do briefly show us Rhaenyra's map. Rhaenyra has like this magnetized map on the wall where she's looking at where Tumbleton is. The point of which is that Tumbleton is very close to King's Landing. So yeah, look, it's tricky, but hey, come watch Alt Shift X if you want to know that stuff. We will have more geography corners in our future live streams. Thank you, Mr. Donny Mac, who says, House Hightower is the epitome of power behind the scenes. They finance both the Faith and the Citadel. I think they had a plan to be the power behind the Iron Throne. I mean, that was very much Otto Hightower's plan. Otto was the power behind the throne for much of Viserys' reign, I think. And Alicent was the power behind the throne for years after that. Which is probably a good position for the Hightowers to be in. And I think that maybe the Hightowers have overplayed their hand by trying to have a more direct influence by putting Alicent's children on the throne. And this might not end terribly well for the Hightowers, is what I'm thinking. But Ormond is even more balls out. Ormond is putting even more chips down. So, what happens if this, I wonder if this will pay off for Ormond or not. Thank you, Josh, who says, best episode in years. Anyone else think Sunfire will return? Oh, well, we'll talk about that in the spoiler zone. Thank you, Sol, who says, do you think Ormond is dyeing Daeron's hair so that he doesn't look Targaryen? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that they wouldn't have dyed fake Daeron's hair pale unless real Daeron has naturally pale hair. And so, I think that, Ormond is symbolically suppressing Daeron's identity by dyeing his hair. I mean, it reminds me of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Season 1, Episode 6, when Egg sees his Targaryen blonde hair, starting to grow back. And Egg shaves his head as though to hide and to suppress his Targaryen identity, but his Targaryen identity keeps coming through. I mean, it's like Alan in House of the Dragon Season 2. Alan shaves his head to hide his Targaryen pale hair. So in this show, I would love to see Alan grow out his pale hair. And I would love to see Daeron grow out his pale hair. Imagine pale roots as his dyed brown hair grows out and his Targaryen pale hair grows in. Wouldn't that be cool? Thank you, Cole, who says, do you think the show is rushing things? I didn't think Otto's death would happen until midway through the season. Is it rushing things? Look, if you look at the books, House of the Dragon Season 1 covers a lot of pages. House of the Dragon Season 1 covers about 62 pages from the book. House of the Dragon Season 2 covers half that. It covers about 29 pages in the book. And to tell the rest of this story, to my mind, it needs at least 125 more pages from the book, maybe 148 pages from the book. So my point is that they do have to move faster. They have to pick up the pace. Because Season 2 was half as fast as Season 1. I think they need to go twice as fast as Season 1 for Season 3 and 4 to finish the whole story. I mean, it's kind of an unfair comparison because, Season 1 covered 20 years. It covered more of a time period. But yes, I do think they have to speed up. And I think that that's part of why there's been a lot of battles happening off screen. The Red Fork battle between the Riverlords and the Westermen, and the Fish Feed battle between the Riverlords and the Westermen. Both of those battles happened quickly off screen. The Hightower army defeated the Beesbreeze off screen. I think that's part of how they're speeding things up. And I think it makes sense because Fire and Blood has a lot of Glup Shido minor characters who aren't really all that important. Do we really need to spend a whole episode with Garibald Grey and Humphrey Lefford and Pate of Longleaf? probably not. I think it makes sense that the show is focusing the story on its main characters, because otherwise there would be 100 characters in this show. So I think that that's part of the nature of the adaptation, and it's always a balance of what they include and what they don't include. Thank you, Santiago, who says, what happened to Meleese's skull in King's Landing? I feel like it would be a powerful sight for many of the characters, and a bad omen. I agree. I mean, it's interesting that we saw Balerian's skull in the Red Keep in Season 1, and we also saw another dragon skull at Dragonstone in Season 2. So, yeah, I would love to see Meleese's skull pop up somewhere. In the reign of King Aerys, Aerys kept like a dozen dragon skulls hanging from the ceiling in the Grand Hall, which is pretty cool. And in the time of Game of Thrones, the dragon skulls are in the basement, tucked away by Robert Baratheon. So yeah, I would love to know where the skull is. Hydration break. Jenny of Coldstone Creamery says, will Rhaenyra exploit Ormond's aversion to strong smells by having dragons airdrop stinky things on Tumbleton? I think that would make sense. I mean, you know, like, if she just got her dragons to, like, poop on Tumbleton like seagulls, I think that would drive Ormond crazy. She just needs to drop something smelly down the chimney of the castle at Tumbleton, and Ormond would go nuts. So maybe they should attempt that. Arya says Ormond Hightower is why psych students shouldn't be allowed to read Nietzsche. Also, what in each of the 7 hells is he talking about? I think the short version is that Ormond thinks that his people are superior and more worthy of power than everybody else. Which is, you know, he's not the first person to have that idea, is he? Thank you, Smeef, who says, for as dark and dramatic as this show can be, I love all the funny little moments. Ormond's little freakout from Gwen's letter, Ulf trying to get favours for his drinking buddies, Manderley asking, has anyone thought of a tax? Yeah, I think this is a very funny show. I think this show is really amazing in how it balances its tone, because this show has a lot of horror. And the show has a lot of, like, serious themes and like, dark moments, including war and sexual assault and, like, dark, realistic, awful, horrific moments. And it also is very hilarious and, like, goofy sometimes. I think characters like Ulf and Daemon are often hilarious. So, yeah, I think they do a great job of balancing that tone. Thank you very much to Cyril Blackfire with a generous donation. Thank you very much. Who says, okay, little theory. What if Daeron's hair is white, but because of Ormond Hightower's purity obsession, he's dyed it with the Hightower auburn brown coloring his whole life? Yeah, I think we've talked about this. I think that Daeron is naturally Targaryen blonde, and Ormond is dyeing the hair. I think that makes sense. I wonder if auburn hair dye existed in medieval times, but it seems to exist in Westeros. And I would love to see him grow out his Targaryen hair color. Thank you, Wrigley is home, who says, I like using Rey Nettles to turn Daemon against Rhaenyra, and you can see how the small folk, well, we'll get to that in the spoiler zone. We're not in the spoiler zone yet. Thank you, Teching, who says, random question, but is there anything happening in Dawn? Are they just sipping tea and watching the chaos unfold? Well, remember that Dawn is not part of the Seven Kingdoms yet. Like, the Targaryens have tried to conquer Dawn, and they've failed. And it's only much later on that, Egg's grandfather, King Daeron, brings Dawn into the realm with a marriage alliance. So yeah, I think the answer is yes. Dawn is sipping tea and enjoying the Dragon Lords destroying themselves, and just chilling in the water gardens eating blood oranges. I think that Otto in the books sends a letter to the Martells and says, hey, can you help us in our dragon war? And the Martells say, no thanks. So, yeah, they don't participate. Thank you, a honey badger, who says that Ormond's got ego and crazy Aryan needs in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Thank you. Here comes the Johnny, who says, easily the best episode. Bold John's haircut crushed it as usual. Ormond is such a Chadley fellow. I would have a number of pints with Ulf and his buds. I love Bold John Roxton's bowl cut. They should call him Bowl Cut John Roxton. Thank you, George, who says, is there a plan for a real June 2? Yeah, we have multiple big June videos that we've been working on for a while, and after this Dragon season and after the play, my plan is to finish those June videos, because June Part 3 is coming out in December. So don't you worry, after Dragon time, it's gonna be June time. Thank you, Daniel Curtis, who says, I feel like a theme of the dance is an analysis of nuclear war that's kind of swept past to focus on characters and gender, which is interesting, but would like the complexity for military maneuver that seems so rushed. Yeah, I mean, George Martin has said that dragons are an analogy for nuclear weapons because they're so destructive, and it's questionable if they should ever be considered, and there's a potential for mutually assured destruction. Yeah, they could emphasize that more, couldn't they? I think that sort of making the logistics and the strategy make sense is tricky, because, like, do armies of men really make sense in a world where dragons can easily burn armies of men? I think George wanted to have his cake and eat it too, because he wanted cool battles with knights on the ground, and he also wanted cool battles with dragons, and it's hard for both of those to be relevant in the same world. But yeah, that is a theme. Thank you, Daniel Curtis, who says, they could have given it 40 episodes, then they could have included more. Yeah, so anyone who's read the books is thinking a lot about the things that they cut. And originally, House of the Dragon Season 2 was meant to be 10 episodes, but it got cut down to 8. And you can feel that. Like, the first 2 episodes of Season 3 feel like the climactic final episodes that were meant to be in Season 2. And so as a result, there kind of is only 6 episodes for them to do House of the Dragon Season 3. And presumably they'll only have 8 episodes in House of the Dragon Season 4. So yeah, it does feel a bit squeezed. And, you know, ideally they pick the things that are most important and they write a tight, succinct story. But there are things that were lost and cut. Thank you, Skilled Warman, who says, which Halo game do you think that scoundrel, Alt-Shift-X, will compare to this episode in Dragon Time? I think that Alt-Shift-X has only played Halo 2. What's the word? I forget the word. Yeah, I don't know why Swift and Gliders keep talking about Halo 2, but if you want to hear it, watch Dragon Time on Nebula at the link below. Thank you, Ack, who says, war aside, loving the 3-way battle between Corlys, Daemon, and Ormond for peak diva status in the show. Yeah, I mean, Corlys does kind of throw a tantrum by running off and fighting pirates instead of obeying his queen. And Daemon has thrown several spectacular tantrums throughout the show, and Ormond ruins Lord Footley's lovely table with his sword. So everyone's having some big tantrums. Thank you for the donation from Johnny, who says Daemon was about to lose his shit with Caraxes. Yeah, I wonder if Daemon's going to be a bit, like, worried and insecure about his control of Caraxes from now on. Thank you, Jess, who says that Rhaena out-freakied her dad with her dragon. I mean, the other thing is that Rhaena's dragon is bigger than Daemon's dragon. Daemon's dragon is, like, a bit less than 57 years old, and Sheepstealer is around 80 years old. And generally, the older the dragon, the bigger the dragon. So not only has Rhaena claimed a wild dragon, which Daemon thought was impossible, but Rhaena has a bigger, more powerful dragon than Daemon does. So I think that Daemon is starting to, like, question everything, and realizing that he has neglected his daughter to his peril. Thank you, Queerstown Ayatora, who says, Jane Arryn can rule a house sitting on her throne, but a princess cannot be a queen regent sitting on the Iron Throne. Why? I think the idea is that the throne operates by different rules than other houses, but a lady only gets to rule a house and a castle if they have no male heirs. Men come before women in the succession, with lordly castles as well as with the throne. But with the throne, there is an argument that the throne is different to how other lords and houses are inherited, and that only kings may ever sit the throne. And that was a precedent that was established a couple of times prior in history. But it is messy, and it's not always consistent. And like sometimes you have like uncles stealing the throne when they shouldn't be, and sometimes women get disinherited, and sometimes there's regencies. So like George Martin has said that inheritance in this world is a bit wibbly wobbly. The rule is that the eldest male is the heir. The eldest male, the eldest son is the heir. And if there are no sons, then a daughter can inherit. But it's like, does a daughter come before an uncle? Does a daughter come before a bastard son? It's all a little bit wibbly-wobbly, and as a result, there are wars. And as a result, you might think, maybe this is a bad system. Maybe primogeniture ain't it. Maybe we can come up with a better system. Thank you, Fack, who says, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. When you are a Targaryen with a dragon, it seems like murdering a random person and burning their corpse to hide their identity and pass them off as someone else is a surprisingly common solution. Well, yeah, so this episode, Daemon kills a random goat herd and claims that he was the rider of Sheepstealer. And I guess that's similar to the harebrained scheme in Season 1, when Daemon and Carl killed a random servant and claimed that it was Laenor, because they faked Laenor's death so that Rhaenyra could marry Daemon, which is a pretty baffling thing that happened that isn't in the books, which is not mentioned much again. I think it's kind of crazy that Corlys apparently still thinks that Rhaenyra murdered his son Laenor, and he's never talked to Rhaenyra about it. That's kind of crazy, in my opinion. Here comes to Johnny, says, where is Tyland Lannister? Yeah, so Tyland Lannister was with Shariko the pirate in Season 3, Episode 1, and Shariko pushed Tyland overboard. We never got to find out if Tyland had sex with Shariko's wives, tragically. So it might be that Tyland is dead. Or maybe Tyland survived. I mean, Corlys survived being pushed overboard in heavy armor, so maybe Tyland will survive as well. I hope that Tyland will come back. Thank you, Jess, who says, it makes way more sense for Daemon to be like this about Rhaena than some random girl like in the books. Yeah, so in the books there's a different plotline where a girl called Nettles rides Sheepstealer, and it's looking like there are some similarities in the plotline, but they've substituted Rhaena for Nettles. And yeah, look, I'm curious to see how it plays out, because it's a bold change, and I think it's a change that the author George Martin hates, but personally I really liked the scene this episode, so I hope it continues to be interesting. Thank you. Oh, Jess said that 3 times. 4 times, goodness. Thank you, Kaiser Ranson, who says, was disappointed with Darren. I feel he should be the main POV in that plot, and Darren killing that guy also ruins the interesting idea that he is good. I think that Darren didn't want to kill Leo, and I think that Darren does feel empathy and wants to be a moral person, and I think it's interesting when a good and moral person is forced to do something bad, like murdering Leo. So I think there's potential here. I think that Darren has been very passive and obedient so far, and I wonder if that will change. Thank you, Here, who says, like this if you hate Mizaria. Thank you, Jacqueline, who says, some interesting dunk ties this episode. Quinn pointed out that Kristen's father serving a Dondarrion is an interesting parallel. Right, because Dunk from A Night of the Seven Kingdoms served a Dondarrion with his master Arlen, just like Kristen and his father served a Dondarrion. Also, there are children looting the dead soldiers at Rook's Rest, which is like how Dunk looted dead soldiers in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Season 1, Episode 5. Yeah, no, those are some cool parallels. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to compare Dunk to Kristen, of all people, because Dunk, like Kristen, is someone who kind of was a nobody and managed to get a knighthood and managed to meet some important people and managed to get some better status and opportunities as a result of their knighthood and their service. The difference being that Kristen broke his vows and made some bad choices and has become a pretty angry, murdering, immoral person, whereas Dunk is trying to be a good and honorable person. But, like, it's interesting that, yeah, they do have some similar backgrounds. Similar opportunities, but making different decisions. Of course, you know, Dunk never had a princess or a queen trying to have sex with him, and I wonder how Dunk would have reacted in the same position. But I don't think that Dunk would have murdered Joffrey Lonmouth at Laenor's wedding. Thank you, Now, who says Damon shushing Caraxes is hilarious. Damon, Matt Smith keeps doing, like, pointing up his finger and waggling his finger about. He's done that with Ormond in the previous episode. Now he's doing that with Caraxes. I feel like Matt Smith picks a different gesture to repeat each season, and this time he's doing a little bit of a finger waggle. But Matt Smith also hits Jane Arryn with the classic Matt Smith lean. He leans against the moon door, which is like the most, like, you know, look how cool and confident I am. I'm leaning against the terrifying death abyss. Matt Smith's a good actor. Thank you, Honey Badger, who says that Ormond's tantrum is like Aegon's tantrum. Yeah, true. Like, when Jaehaerys dies, Aegon angrily smashes Viserys' model city with his sword, just like how Ormond angrily smashes a table with his sword. So, yeah, there's a poor emotional regulation running in the family. My goodness. Thank you, Josh, who says, is House of the Dragon leaning too far into psychosexual themes? I'm enjoying the psychosexual themes, personally. I mean, you're right that, like, the show is leaning into it hard. I mean, like, from the start, they've had those murals in the background of orgies of men and women and dragons all having sex with each other in a big, messy, interspecies cuddle puddle. And that's been part of the fabric of the show from the start. And this show has had so much, like, love sex and hate sex and incest and, you know, Aemond kissing his mother Alicent and Daemon having the dream of having sex with his mother Alyssa, and Aegon and Helena, siblings, marrying each other, and Rhaenyra kissing Mysaria, and, like, every possible avenue of sexual exploration. They're doing it. And I think that that's authentic to, like, what the Targaryens are in the books. The books are all about the messiest relationships possible because it creates drama. And George loves blondes having sex with blondes. So yeah, look, this is the messy world of Targaryens, and I think George Martin loves it. And I guess it's in the eye of the beholder when it gets too icky. Thank you. Here comes DeJohnny, who says Shift appears Swift had sent an orthodox spammer. Thank you. Here comes DeJohnny, who says I am pro beer. Thank you, Daniel, who says, justice for moustache targs and fat targs. Have we ever seen a Targaryen with a moustache or a fat Targaryen? In the books at this point, Rhaenyra gains weight, and they don't seem to have done that in the show. And as for a Targaryen with a moustache, I don't think we've ever seen it. I think there are some Targaryens with beards, but not a lot with targs. Thank you, Joa, who says that Ormond is insane and has some peculiar religious views. He's eccentric, like Leighton, but more violent. Yeah, so in the current timeline, in the main Game of Thrones books, the Lord of Hightower is Leighton Hightower. And by all reports, he spends all his time locked in his high tower with his mad maid, reading books of spells. He seems to be an eccentric shut-in who doesn't participate much in politics, which is fun and funny. At this point in the books, Euron Greyjoy has a big fleet of pirates and appears to be planning some kind of magic ritual involving sacrificing and mutilating a number of priests from different religions, and there's a vision of black bloody waves crashing upon Old Town. so it looks as though Lord Leighton Hightower might get a rude awakening soon in the books. Although when I say soon, I'm talking about a sequel that we've been waiting for 13 years. So the word soon is doing some heavy lifting there. However, I do love Lord Leighton Hightower. Thank you, Pontus, who says, I love how Harrenhal has been portrayed in this show. It feels like something out of Dark Souls. Old, cursed, and decaying. Yeah, I agree. It's the vibe of, like, dark apocalyptic collapse on a both architectural and metaphysical level. Thank you, Stansky, who says that inverted house colours signify bastards, and the Blackfires are still decades off. So shouldn't we read the Black Dragon on a bloody field as signifying the Targaryen bastard theme? That's a great point, Stansky. So the opening sequence features a black Targaryen dragon. The official Targaryen sigil is a red dragon. And like 100 years later, there is a bastard branch of the Targaryens called the Blackfires, which are relevant for the Duncan Egg, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms era. At this point, there are no Blackfires, but you're right that, like, even now, a black dragon could theoretically represent any bastard Targaryen. It's like how, you know, a bastard Stark could theoretically be a white wolf. So Jon Snow's sigil could theoretically be a white wolf if he had a sigil. But many bastards have, like, inverted sigil house colors. So, like, you're right. Like, you know, the bastard Targaryen, the black dragon, could be a symbol for Joffrey and Luke and Jace, who are bastard children of Rhaenyra Targaryen. I mean, I guess they could also have inverted strong colors because they're the children of Harwin Strong. But yeah, you're right. I mean, bastardy is so important to this episode in particular because Alan and Adam and Ulf and Hugh are all bastards, as well as Joffrey, and that's Rhaenyra's the Queen of Bastards. Maybe that should have been the title of this episode. Wouldn't it be fun if the title of this episode was Queen of Bastards? But alas, it was Tumbleton. Thank you, Grinch, who says, the hostage fake Darren Tumbleton plot is goofy. If Ormond camped out there, then fly a dragon or two over it down to Old Town and burn it down to spur him out. Nothing special about Tumbleton. Yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like Rhaenyra could just go and, like, attack the Hightowers at Old Town. Like, she could just, you know, swoop up and smash a bit of the Hightower, or she could, like, attack some Hightower assets in some way that doesn't cause collateral damage. Or just like interrupt Hightower, like, economics or trade. She could just lay siege to Tumbleton, right? She could block off Ormond's supply lines and force him to surrender. And, you know, the problem with that, obviously, is that the people of Tumbleton would be in danger and might starve. I mean, that's Ormond's fault. But it is also true that Rhaenyra might be blamed, and Rhaenyra doesn't want people to starve. So it is a tricky situation. It is a tricky situation. But, like, I don't think Tumbleton should necessarily be Rhaenyra's top priority. I think Rhaenyra's top priority should be, I don't know, taking the Lannisters' gold and feeding the people of King's Landing. Like, if Rhaenyra's busy trying to save the people of Tumbleton, she's not saving the people of King's Landing and all the other people in the realm who need help and stability. The realm is full of millions of people who need food and help and stability, so she should focus on the people who she can help as opposed to the people who are currently being held hostage by Ormond. Just some thoughts. Thank you, Jacqueline, who apologizes for the copy-pasted messages. I hope you weren't charged multiple times, Jacqueline. Email if you need a refund. Thank you, Andrew, who says, Aegon payoff must be huge. He's going through it right now. Yeah. Aegon is having a bad day. Like as I said, he was literally the king on the throne like 5 episodes ago, and now he's been told that he's dead and he has to scoop human shit for the rest of his life. I mean, that is a pretty big downfall, you know? That's a pretty big drop off. And so he's understandably a bit glum about this. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, where's this going? Like, how do we pay off a character arc where someone loses everything and goes from king of the world to poopsmith in 400 hours? Like, that's nuts. So, like, what does this add up to? Where does this go? Maybe it's just time to retire, man. Maybe it's time to just, like, find a way to live as far away from the capital as possible. Maybe that's what he should do. Thank you, Plural Board, who says, my prediction came true about the White Walkers appearing. Do you think we'll have another White Walker sequence? Maybe they have a pact with Alice. So in Season 2, Damon had a vision of the White Walkers and the darkness and the apocalypse coming, and that's part of why he believes Rhaenyra must be the chosen one who will save Westeros from that apocalypse. And that was kind of surprising. I was not expecting to see White Walkers on House of the Dragon. But, you know, the Targaryens do have visions in the books and in the shows, so it makes some sense. I think it's interesting to bring up Alice because, like, in Game of Thrones, they revealed that the White Walkers were created by the Children of the Forest, who are those hippie elf people who live in the woods. We saw the Night King being created by the Children of the Forest. And I think that in the books, it's going to be, like, a little bit different. But not super different. Like, I think that the creation of the White Walkers might have something to do with, like, Azor Ahai and, like, a human doing some blood magic ritual and doing some evil thing. But the point is that, you know, in the show, and I think also in the books, the White Walkers kind of came from old gods' magic. They came from the trees. I like the idea that the White Walkers are spirits and souls of the dead that were inside the trees, but they, like, refused to go in. Like, because it seems like the old gods, they eat the souls of the dead. When someone dies, their soul goes into the trees. We've, like, seen that happen on page in the prologue of Book 5. And I kind of like the idea that the White Walkers are, like, revenants of the dead that have emerged from the trees. And, like, so the natural order of things is all messed up. The White Walkers their souls should be in the trees, and the dragons should not exist, but ice and fire are both out there in the world. They've escaped from Pandora's box, and they're running amok, and they're throwing the seasons out of whack. That's the vibe that I get. But the idea that Alice might be working with the White Walkers makes some sense, because the old gods have a history of, like, sacrifice. Craster sacrifices his babies to the White Walkers to appease them in the show and the books. And so the idea that Alice might be sort of working with the old gods and with the White Walkers to, like, give souls to the White Walkers or the trees to maintain some kind of cosmic balance, sacrificing people, blood to the weirwoods to keep the order in balance. That I think would make some sense within the mythology of the books and the shows. But that's all very speculative. I mean, look, Alice said previously that she's hungry. She wants Harrenhal, and she tells Daemon she's hungry, and you give me rubies, but that won't satisfy my hunger. And there's lots of imagery with the weirwoods in the books where they are horrifying. There's, like, trees full of skulls, and there's trees that weep blood, and the trees are hungry for human blood. I mean, look at this amazing artwork by Lauren Cannon. The trees eat souls. This is official artwork. So yeah, does Alice want to eat people? Maybe. Is Gale Rankin gonna eat Aemon's soul? Maybe. That's why I pay for HBO. Thank you, Doma, who says, do you think we'll get Fire and Blood Part 2 before the Winds of Winter to get more info on Summerhall? Yeah, so the publication history of this series is very complicated. The problem is that George hasn't finished the main series, and so he's started writing like 2 different prequel series, the Dunk and Egg books and the Fire and Blood history books, but he hasn't finished either of those prequel series because he hasn't finished the main series yet. It's like if you made Attack of the Clones before you made Return of the Jedi. It's a bit arse backwards. And I think that, you know, that there's these bits in the World of Ice and Fire history book where, like, it says, ooh, and then some stuff happened at Summerhall, but oops, the Maesters spilled ink onto the manuscript, so we can't tell you what happened at Summerhall. And, like, I think the reason why George Martin, like, hides parts of his history is that he wants to tell that story in the unfinished Dunk and Egg book series. And, like, there's other stuff in, like, this House of the Dragon story Like, most of the, we do know the full story of the House of the Dragon, but there are some characters in House of the Dragon that we don't know their full story because George hasn't written Fire and Blood 2 yet. So this history book is also an unfinished series. And George R. R. Martin has said that he won't write anything else until The Winds of Winter is done. But after he said that, he published Fire and Blood. So the answer is no one knows. The answer is no one knows what will be published next. Personally, I would love to see the main series finished the most. But George has many plans, and he has a lot of things on his to-do list. So my fingers are crossed. Thank you, Plural Board, who says, I love how Season 3 is playing out. I hope Condell reconsiders his decision. It's not too late to make Season 5. Yeah, so I believe that Ryan Condell, the showrunner, recently said that he said that House of the Dragon will end with Season 4, or at least Ryan's involvement with House of the Dragon will end with Season 4. In theory, this show could continue beyond Season 4. Because after this series of events, there are more events. And you really could make House of the Dragon Season 5, Season 6, maybe Season 7, exploring what happens after the Dance of the Dragons, because that stuff is covered in Fire and Blood. So if Ryan Condell doesn't want to do it, maybe someone else could do it. I think that, I think that the story that happens after this main story, it's a bit more low-key. I think it could be interesting, but it might not have the same, it doesn't have as much action. It doesn't have as much mass appeal, maybe. So I think they could do Hot D Season 5 and 6, but I'm not sure if it will happen. Thank you, Try, who says, when Ormond said they took that power from us, I thought he was confirming that the great Empire of the Dawn was in Westeros, Hightower fused stone, etc. Yeah, so those are some of the sort of esoteric lore details that I think were evoked a bit by what Ormond said here. But what does Ormond say? Ormond says, you're a good Hightower, and it's the will of the gods to win. And he says that the Targaryens are a savage race, rich in cunning. With dark spells, they created abominations to subdue what was rightly ours. We are the superior men against dragons we could not stand. Yeah, I don't think that Ormond is talking about, Hightower dragons. I think he's saying that, Hightowers are just humans, and we were defeated by the Targaryens because they use evil dragons. But yeah, in the books, there is obscure lore that suggests that the Hightowers, or at least the area around Old Town, might have had ancient dragon riders in the distant past. The Great Empire of the Dawn is maybe, theoretically, part of that, ancient dragon rider empire. It's all very obscure, but yeah, I think that Ormond is just anti-dragon and pro-Hightower. I think that's where Ormond is at. But ironically, the secrets do go deeper into the history of Old Town. The books also the books kind of hint that ancient dragon riders were in Old Town, but the books also suggest that sea demons, Lovecraftian fish people might have built the Hightower. That is equally something that the books suggest, is that Cthulhu fish people made the Hightower. So, George Martin is throwing a lot of different ideas out there, so we don't have a lot of certainty about any of this. Thank you, I am Zombie, who says, I recommend the audiobooks if you don't want to tackle reading everything. Roy Dotrice did an amazing job acting every different character. Sad that he passed before George Martin finished the series. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Roy Dotrice's audiobooks, although some people question his pronunciation of Petyr and Brienne instead of Peter and Brienne. Thank you, Eternal Void, who says, did Daemon take Daeron's dragon last episode or not? No, Daemon did not take Daeron's dragon to Sarian. What was the little dragon they mentioned? So Jane Arryn talked about a small dragon, and that's because the small dragon Tyraxes, dragon of Joffrey Velaryon, was at the Vale. But then it's gone to Pentos. No, it's not at Pentos. It's traveling to King's Landing with Joffrey currently. And we also saw the little dragon Stormcloud last season, who is the dragon of little Aegon, the young son of Daemon and Rhaenyra. So yes, it is confusing, but there are two little dragons at play on Team Black who are too young to be useful in the war. But they are the dragons of Joffrey and Rhaenyra's son Aegon. And that's who Jane was talking about. Void says... no. The Hightowers had Darren and his dragon Tessarion the whole time. Thank you, Alt Alex Online, who says... It does seem like Mysaria somehow recognizes the poor sheep herder. Yeah, I think that Mysaria might know or suspect that Daemon is lying about the rider of Sheepstealer. Daemon killed that random goat herd and said that he was the rider of Sheepstealer. And, you know, I think that Mysaria knows Daemon well, and Daemon has lied to Mysaria before, and I think that Mysaria can recognize when Daemon is lying. So, yeah, I wonder if Mysaria might say, hey, Rhaenyra, are you sure that Daemon was telling the truth? Maybe that might happen. Hydration moment. Goodness. I'm like Caraxes up in here. Thank you, Valar Martinis, who says, just joining. Look forward to watching the full upload later. Do you think Alice wrote a letter to Ormond masquerading as Gwaine? Pink letter shit-stirring vibes. Speaking of which, is Rhaenyra thinking of dropping shit and maybe dead rats on Tumbleton? Oh, I like the rats idea. Because, yeah, Alicent just told Rhaenyra that Ormond is very sensitive to smells. And Rhaenyra just killed a bunch of rats. In fact, she served a bunch of rats to those fancy Crownland merchants and lords last episode. What do you think Rhaenyra did with all those dead, cooked rats? Rhaenyra has like dozens or hundreds of cooked dead rats right now. What should she do with them? Maybe she should get Daemon to drop all the dead rats onto Ormond's house. Maybe that would work to mess with his head. And Valar suggests that maybe Alice sent the letter to Ormond that says that Aemond won't be joining him. I mean, I think that Gwaine sent the letter, but like, I guess you're right that. I mean, Gwaine doesn't know for sure that Aemond isn't coming to Tumbleton. I mean, for all Gwaine knows, maybe the reason why Aemond and Vhagar aren't at Harrenhal is because Aemond and Vhagar have left Harrenhal to go to Tumbleton, right? I mean, that would be a pretty logical thing to assume. Like, if Ormond is expecting Aemond and Vhagar to come to Tumbleton, maybe Gwaine should assume the same, and maybe that's why he's not at Harrenhal, right? But, you know, Valar is suggesting that maybe Alice is lying and messing with Ormond, which, you know, I don't think likely, but, I mean, who knows? Alice does surprising things. I was very surprised when last season Alice apparently murdered Lord Grover Tully off screen. That was a surprising thing that happened last season, so maybe Alice is capable of other kinds of shenanigans as well. Thank you, Valar Martinis, who says, Mysaria lingering outside the council room is probably setting up her tattling about Rhaena. Well, we'll talk about some stuff in the spoiler zone. Thank you, Robbie, who says, how dare you laugh at Ritas Vardum, the half-jaw shipmaster of the Sangheli in Halo 2. Look, this is typical Alt-Shift-X nonsense. We're trying to have serious conversations about dragons, and people keep bringing up aliens from Halo 2. This is why I don't hang out with Alt-Shift-X anymore. Outrageous that we're bringing up 2000s classic video games when we should be talking about important dragon politics. If you want to hear such nonsense, go watch Dragon Time. Thank you, Daniel Curtis, who asks about Lord Commander Westerling. Yeah, so you might remember in Season 1, Harold Westerling was the sworn protector of Rhaenyra Targaryen. And in Season 1, Episode 9, Harold said, I'm not going to go and murder Rhaenyra. I quit. I quit as a Kingsguard. And so in Season 1, Episode 9, Harold walked away, and we haven't seen him since. No one has talked about him since. I would love to see him come back. I feel like it would be really cool if, in a moment of need, like, you know, Rhaenyra is trapped and she needs help, and then, like, Graham McTavish just, like, jumps through a wall and saves her and carries her off on his shoulder. I think that would be rad. None of that happens in the books. Harold, yeah, it's different in the books, so anything's possible. Fingers crossed for the return of Harold Westerling. Thank you, Vala, who says, have you noticed that House of the Dragon's opening theme is shorter than the opening theme of Game of Thrones? There are 2 fewer na-na-na-na-na-na right before the last verse. It's been nettling me since Season 1. I'm glad that someone's counting the na-nas. Someone's got to count the na-nas, and I'm glad you're doing it, Vala Martinis. Yeah, well, look, attention spans are getting shorter, so opening sequences have got to get shorter. Look, I wish that they created a new original opening theme song for House of the Dragon instead of reusing the one from Game of Thrones. It's a different show. It's a different tone. It's a different vibe. It's less adventure, and it's more psychosexual blood and fiery spiral into oblivion. And I think if we found a opening soundtrack that sounded more like that, it might be more fitting. Thank you, Jeremiah, who says, I knew that actor from a few episodes ago was going to be Alicent's youngest son, Darren, because that's the same actor who is going to play Link in the live-action Legend of Zelda movie they are developing. Yeah, Darren is also going to play Link. Shadow Humor says this episode was a nothing burger. Jess K says Caraxes is older than that since he was Aemon's dragon first. Yeah, but Aemon was born when? I'm pretty sure that Caraxes is only like 50-something years old. I might be wrong about that, but I think that Caraxes hatched during Aemon's lifetime. And I think that's where I got the number under 57 years. I may have made a mistake. We'll have to look it up. I may have made a mistake. But I think that Caraxes is younger than Sheepstealer. I might be wrong. Thank you, Eli Simon, who says, have you seen Obsession or Backrooms? I have seen Obsession, and I thought it was a really fun, effective movie, and I recommend it. I have not yet seen Backrooms, but I want to. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good horror movies coming out right now. I like Zach Cregger's movies, like Weapons and Barbarian. I think they're pretty rad. And I like Talk to Me and Bring Her Back. Lots of good horror these days. Thank you, Vela Martinez, who said, Matt Smith did not start waggling his finger this season. Daemon waggled at Jason Luke during Viserys' dinner in Season 1. Respect the waggle. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right, Vala Martinez. Thank you for keeping me honest. Yeah, Matt Smith has been waggling way since Season 1. So, you're so right. Thank you, Space Between Spaces, who says, I kind of feel like Larys's plan is to get to Dragonstone and to give Aegon to Rhaenyra to spare his own life. Well, that would be fun, wouldn't it? If Larys is like, all right, get on the boat, Aegon, we're going to Braavos. We're going to be safe in Braavos. And then the ship pulls up at Dragonstone, and Aegon's like, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I have been bamboozled. Space says, what role do you think magic plays in the Hot D Westeros? I'd expect more, since there are so many dragons compared to Game of Thrones time. Yeah, so in Book 2, Quaithe says that when there are more dragons around, there's more magic. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe when there's more magic, there are more dragons. It's all very mysterious and wibbly-wobbly. But yeah, I mean, there are more dragons alive now than ever, so you would think that there would be more magic than ever. And we have seen a lot of magic. Like, Helena knows things about the future. Damon has those crazy visions with Alice. Alice can transform into a goat. We've seen green men walking around for the first time ever. So we have seen a lot of magic. I mean, we haven't seen, Melisandre giving birth to a shadow baby, like in Game of Thrones, and we haven't seen resurrections, like the resurrection of Beric Dondarrion and Jon Snow. So, there was a lot of magic around in the time of Game of Thrones as well. But, yeah, look, it's all a bit mysterious. I like how they're doing the magic in this show. Like, they're adding more magic than was in the books. And I think most of it is fun and interesting. And it's like, I think one of the things with magic in the books is that magic doesn't really solve problems. Magic often causes more problems than it solves. Because magic is, a metaphor for weird and extreme kinds of power. And it tends to be tied with sacrifice and abomination. And so magic is generally, like, I think a metaphor for doing, like, shady, wild stuff that might be a terrible idea. So I like how they're handling it in this show. Because no one's going around, like, swinging lightsabers and saying Alakazam to make their enemies disappear. It's more like people are having weird magical experiences that change their mind about their family, Like, magic is more like a psychedelic than it is a magic spell. Thank you, Vala Martini, who says, a sinister theme emerging is old gods trying to seduce or con a Targaryen to be under their control. It's more than just trying to kill off dragons. Alice tried to use Daemon, now trying to use Aemond. Maybe they eventually succeed with Bloodraven. Well, I think that also might be where Bran and Jon Snow are going. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot... I think that there's a subtext here about the trees of the old gods are trying to swallow the blood of the Targaryens. I think that the Targaryen magic was stolen from the old gods, and the old gods are trying to get that magic back. I think that is maybe what the prince that was promised is. I think that the trees want to devour the blood of the Targaryens that was taken from them, and I think that might be what restores order. I think that the White Walkers might be coming to take the babies, to take the prince that was promised, to take Jon Snow, to take Gilly's baby Craster, who may or may not be a bastard of Bloodraven, if you believe the theories. This is all highly speculative. But yeah, I think the trees want to eat the dragon blood. Thank you, Stansky, who says, non-House of the Dragon, but isn't it odd that Aemon didn't react to Mormont's Raven at Jon's election as Lord Commander? Wouldn't Aemon be the first to guess that his uncle Bloodraven is up to his old tricks? Or is he unfazed because he and Bloodraven chat every day via the bird? Yeah, so in the books, Jon Snow becomes Lord Commander partly because a raven chants Jon Snow's name. And there are some ravens who Sam teaches to say Jon Snow's name, but those are different ravens to Jill Mormont's raven, who has done some other magical stuff, like seeming to give Jon a dream about being Azor Ahai. So there are magical, mysterious things happening with the ravens at Castle Black. And I agree, like, Aemon would have known Bloodraven. And Aemon would have had some awareness of Bloodraven's magic, I would think. Not confirmed, but I would think he knew that stuff. So I think that's a good point, Stansky. Maybe George Martin wasn't really thinking about that at the time. Thank you, 50, who says, how many days before official release do you get the ep? Usually something like 4 days. Thank you, Kat, who says, speaking of new movies to watch, everyone needs to watch Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. Go to the theater and have a blast. All right, I think it might be time to enter the spoiler zone. We've been talking for 3.5 hours, my goodness. That's just ridiculous. All right. I will remind you that Nebula has a bunch of exclusive stuff, including Dragon Time. And in a couple of weeks on Nebula, we'll have some conversations about the new Mad King play, which I think might reveal some of the oldest mysteries in the Game of Thrones series, which I'm quite excited about. But either way, thank you very much for listening and being a part of these streams. I'm really enjoying it. Next week's live stream will be a little delayed. I think it'll be on the Monday instead of on the Sunday night. If you're looking to know what the exact time is, you can check on altshiftx.com, or you can look at the community posts on the AltShiftX YouTube channel under the Posts tab, and I'll let you know when it's coming out. But I hope you'll all join us. And let's now talk about some spoilers. We are in the spoiler zone. Spoiler zone, spoiler zone, spoiler zone. Alright, do you want to talk about Sunfire? Could we talk about Sunfire? So, Sunfire in the books is alive. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Spoilers, spoilers. Sunfire in the books eats Rhaenyra. So, I'm pretty sure Sunfire's not dead. I don't think they're going to change that. But it's Sunfire does look pretty dead, doesn't he? Sunfire's not looking great. So I wonder if some kind of magic will be needed to bring Sunfire back. Larys uses the word resurrection. So I wonder if someone will resurrect Sunfire. I think the most magical character in the show is Alice Rivers. So maybe Alice Rivers will resurrect Sunfire, but I don't know how Alice would resurrect Sunfire, and I don't know why Alice Rivers would resurrect Sunfire. Larys Strong is a mysterious dude, and Larys Strong is the blood of House Strong, who are first men, who may have the blood of Greenseers. I mean, Larys might be Alice's half-brother or half-nephew or something. Some say that Alice is Simon Strong's bastard. So Larys also has a history of knowing things that he shouldn't know. Some people theorize that Larys can magically control the rats in the Red Keep. So maybe Larys has the power to resurrect Sunfire. I mean, maybe Aegon can resurrect Sunfire. There's lots of talk of Valyrian blood magic in this show. Maybe Aegon will perform some kind of blood magic ritual. Maybe Aegon will sacrifice Janos or Tangletongue or Larys to wake Sunfire. Maybe someone will walk into Sunfire's corpse. Maybe Sunfire will be some messed up, scary zombie dragon. I would love to see the most beautiful, shiny golden dragon turned into a horrifying zombie dragon. Wouldn't that be terrifying and scary? So I think there's interesting possibilities there. So yeah, I think there's many possibilities. When Ormond was talking about how Targaryens are all evil and twisted, it reminded me of the Shepherd in the books. So in the books, there's a character called the Shepherd who riles up the common people and preaches against the Targaryens and says the Targaryens are evil. And he does say some similar things about the dragons being abominations, brought up from vile magic. He doesn't quite explicitly say that they were created by spells, but he says similar stuff. And I think in some of the trailers, Ormond says that the people will reject Rhaenyra. So I think that Ormond might do a propaganda campaign against Rhaenyra. I think that's part of Ormond's goal. And Ormond is this sneaky, manipulative guy who uses false appearances for his political goals. So I wonder if Ormond is doing something similar to the Shepherd. I wonder if Ormond will cause the people to turn against Rhaenyra. That might be interesting, but I hope that they don't replace the Shepherd entirely. Because the Shepherd was an embodiment of the common people. He was a voice for the small folk, rejecting the kings and queens, which was kind of an interesting thing. I do like that they have Sylvia and, mostly Sylvie, representing the common people, asking for justice. But I hope that we have the Shepherd as well. I hope we have Gaiman Palehair. I hope we have Sylvana and Essie with Sylvie and Mysaria or Alinda. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, thank you. We talked about that. Thank you. Cannibal could take Sunfire's later role. So yeah, there are 3 wild dragons: Sheep Stealer and Grey Ghost and Cannibal. Cannibal is old and scary and eats other dragons. And yeah, I guess it's a theory that like if Sunfire really is dead, maybe it will be Cannibal instead who kills spoilers kills Rhaenyra. But I think that part of the point, spoilers, is that the family destroys itself. The reason why Aegon kills Rhaenyra with his dragon is the whole tragedy of this story is that it's sibling against sibling. This family is eating itself. The dragon is eating itself like an Ouroboros. So I think that if it's just some random wild dragon that does it, it takes away some of the symbolic meaning of Rhaenyra's death. So I hope that it's Sunfire who kills Rhaenyra. And so I hope we get to see some crazy Sunfire resurrection. That could be fascinating. And of course, like a resurrected Sunfire meshes with Aegon, because Aegon is like symbolically dead, believed to be dead. He has lost everything. And like ultimately, spoilers, I think Aegon and Sunfire both die. So it's kind of like a failed resurrection. Like there could be something really sad and pathetic about this sort of like shambling, half alive Sunfire and Aegon who are both clinging to life when really their time is done. And they try to cling to life, but they ultimately fail. And there's something so sad about that. And spoilers, I think it's interesting if it might be Alicent who poisons Aegon. Because this story has talked a lot about Alicent, you know, sort of coming to terms with her sons being evil and reluctantly agreeing for Aegon to die and feeling responsible for all of Aegon's evil. And I think it could be really dark and powerful if it's Alicent who kills Aegon. Very dark. And so Josh, thanks for the donation, says, do you think Sunfire will return renamed the Grey Ghost? Because Grey Ghost is one of the wild dragons. And, like, it would be interesting if, like, Sunfire, the golden, the most bright and beautiful of the dragons, ends up being the most drab and colorless of the dragons. Because, I mean, it does look like Sunfire has lost some of his color. Like, his golden scales have gone dark, sort of a gray-brown. And so it would be really interesting if the golden dragon becomes the grey dragon. George loves his color symbolism. Thank you, Wrigley, who says that Rhaena is taking the place of Nettles, who's a character from the books, and it seems as though Daemon's relationship with Rhaena will turn Daemon against Rhaenyra, which is similar to the plot in the books, where, spoiler, Rhaenyra gets paranoid and orders the death of Nettles. And so I guess, spoiler, what might happen is that Rhaenyra might order the death of Rhaena, and Daemon might turn against Rhaenyra as a result. I think that might be what happens. I think that makes sense. But Wrigley hopes that Sunfire isn't really dead. And yeah, I really hope that Sunfire isn't really dead. I don't think that Sunfire is really dead, because otherwise they wouldn't have said it so many times, and they wouldn't have Aegon saying he's still alive. Thank you, Vala Martinez, who says that Mysaria lingering outside the council room is probably setting up her tattling about Rhaena. Yeah, so I don't think Mysaria knows that Rhaena has a dragon, but I do think that Mysaria suspects that Daemon is lying about the rider of Sheep Stealer. So I wonder if Mysaria might investigate, she might question Daemon, she might find out the truth, and then she might tell Rhaenyra the truth, even though she knows it might divide Rhaenyra's family, but she does it to try and get more influence on Rhaenyra, you know? Like, I think Mysaria might do something. She might be dividing this family more for her own goals than for the good of Rhaenyra's side. So that could be interesting. Watcher says, do you think Rhaena look more like how Nettles is described now in the books? Well, I mean, spoilers, Nettles in the books ultimately becomes a fire witch who lives in the mountains of the Vale, and a tribe of mountain clansmen build like a culture around her where they worship her and bring her gifts and food, and some of them get burned by her dragon Sheep Stealer, and that's why they're called the Burned Men. So there's actually a really cool piece of lore that exists in the main series. The Burned Men still exist in the main series. They fight with Tyrion, and it all comes from Nettles / Rhaena with the dragon Sheep Stealer. So Yeah, look, when I first saw last season that Rhaena was replacing Nettles, I thought that they wouldn't possibly turn Rhaena into the Fire Witch, but now I think they will. I think that Rhaena might go down that path, the path that Nettles takes in the books, and maybe they will thread this needle, and maybe they will combine the stories of Rhaena and Nettles in a way that feels good. It remains to be seen. I liked the scene this episode. Let's see what happens next episode. Thank you, Jenny, who says, will Sunfire and Aegon heal faster in proximity? What was it that Jaehaerys said? I think one of Jaehaerys' children was dying of illness, and Jaehaerys said she needs a dragon. Jaehaerys believed that his Targaryen child needed a dragon in order to survive and stay healthy. So, yeah, I think that is an idea that's in the books, is that Targaryens and dragons are stronger and healthier when they are together. Thank you, Vala Martinez, who says, maybe the dead are resurrected using actual minds from the old gods' network warging into corpses. Maybe dragons have a biolock, so only Targaryen minds can warg into them. Maybe the old gods need a Targaryen mind in the network to resurrect Viserion. Vala Martinez, that's a big brain move. Yeah, so the old gods, the trees, contain the spirits of the dead. And I think it's an interesting idea that, like, yeah, maybe a resurrected person is not really that person. It's actually some other soul from within the old gods puppeteering that corpse. I think that that's what Cold Hands is. Because Cold Hands is unique, because Cold Hands is a zombie, but Cold Hands can speak. And Cold Hands is not working for the White Walkers. At least not the same way that the Whites are. So I think that Cold Hands is like a corpse puppeteered by the old gods. And like that is an idea that George Martin has written about before in stories like Meat House Man, part of his Corpse Handler series, in which corpses are controlled psionically. George Martin likes that kind of dark, messed up stuff. That's a fun idea that, like, yeah, maybe the old gods need the soul of a Targaryen in order to control dragons. And maybe that's part of why the old gods are using Bloodraven in the main series, because he has Targaryen blood. And maybe with Bloodraven, the old gods can control dragons somehow. I think it's difficult because you need a character, you need a face to represent the will of the old gods. Like, if a dragon starts being under the control of the old gods, how do we understand its motives, you know? I mean, the Children of the Forest and Leaf, perhaps, in the books, but I don't know. It's, I think we need a character to represent them. And I think in House of the Dragon, Alice Rivers could represent the will of the old gods. So it would be really interesting if Sunfire was resurrected, but if Sunfire was, like, controlled by Alice Rivers instead of by Aegon. That would be interesting. And that might fit some of the esoteric lore, but I think that the story requires that Aegon controls a resurrected Sunfire. So there's a few ways it could play out. But yeah, like, I do like the idea that the old gods want to, like, use Targaryen blood to their advantage. And I like the idea that, like, you know, Jon Snow has both Stark and Targaryen blood. He has ice and fire, and maybe the White Walkers want Jon for that reason. I think that's another interesting idea in the books. So, many possibilities. Squalor says, hi Shifty, you always kindly say we. Who is we? Collaborators or editors? We couldn't possibly comment. Rhaenyra is not the first to use the royal we. However, there is, Alt-Shift-X is a team effort. Thank you, Vala, who says, if Sunfire's going to be resurrected, maybe it's going to be Aegon warging into his corpse. Maybe Larys teaches Aegon how to skin change. Or maybe even Aegon and Larys mind meld into a network of two to do it. It's funny because, like, Aegon and Larys are two of the most, like, evil people in the show. And it would be so funny to see these two misfit people working together to operate a dragon corpse. It would be such a strange and interesting thing. I wonder, like, how deep. I don't think they'll get that deep into the mechanics. I think someone's going to perform a ritual, then the dragon will be alive and it'll be gruesome. and it'll represent Aegon's like messed up soul. I think that's what they'll do. But yeah, I am very curious about the mechanics. Pearl says June breakdowns when? After House of the Dragon Season 3, after the Mad King Harrenhal play, we're planning to do some more June videos. All right, I think it's time to wrap up this live stream. Thank you all very much for participating. I appreciate it. Give us a like, give us a comment. You can listen to these live streams on podcast apps for free, ad-free, if you would like. The link to the podcast feed is in the video description. You can also listen on Spotify, but there are also free podcast apps, so that's a cool thing to do. If you would like to support the channel, and if you would like 80 hours more of exclusive videos, you can check that out at Nebula. You can get 50% off a annual Nebula subscription using my link. It's a good way to support the channel. We're doing Dragon Time, or Alt Shift X and Glidus are doing Dragon Time each week, and that comes out right after the episode airs. Next week's live stream will be a little bit later. It'll be on the Monday rather than this Sunday night. If you want to know when it is, I reckon I'll update you. You can check out altshiftx.com or look in the YouTube community posts on the Alt Shift X channel. And yeah, thank you all for joining. And we'll see you next time. Thanks very much, everybody.